Chapter 1025. The well didn't seem deep, but if one truly jumped in, they would discover that this was just an illusion. Jiang Yuanyi rapidly sank down, and what caused his heart to tremble was that a suction force erupted from the bottom of the well, wrapping around him and causing him to sink faster and faster. The icy cold aura around him became stronger and stronger as it continued to sink. It was like tiny needles that constantly pierced into his body, ignoring his cultivation and penetrating deep into his bones. It was as if his entire body was about to be sealed in ice. After an incomparably long period of time, there was a dull thump as Jiang Yuanyi smashed through the surface of the water and plunged into the bone-chilling well water. From the outside, this well water seemed clear and transparent. But after truly falling in, he discovered that it was completely pitch black, without the least bit of light. An indescribable and invisible panic erupted from the depths of his heart, flooding Jiang Yuanyi's mind. Because of the icy cold invading his body, his pale face lost all color. He subconsciously struggled, trying to stabilize his body in the water. But the pitch-black well water was as thick as mud and possessed an astonishing viscosity. Every movement required a tremendous amount of strength. And at this time, not only did the suction force not disappear, but it became even stronger. All of this caused Jiang Yuanyi to inevitably fall into a state of panic. His struggles increased, and a thin layer of ice began to appear on the surface of his body. As he moved, it constantly shattered and froze, emitting cracking sounds. "It's over, it's over. I'm going to die in here. I don't want to die, I want to live. Save me, save me." As he wailed in his heart, a calm voice resounded in his mind. "If you really want to die, you can continue struggling." Jiang Yuanyi froze in place. This was because there was no way he would mistake this voice for Qinyu. As if grasping at the last straw of hope, Jiang Yuanyi forcefully suppressed his fear and forced himself to remain still. It was only now that he discovered that while he was still, even though the suction force didn't decrease, the suppression of the well water had mostly dissipated. "I'll speak, you listen." Qi Ning continued to speak. "This well water is the strength you need to expel. Follow my instructions and attack with all your strength. Remember, I said with all my strength. If you won't live, you had best do as I say. This is the first time. This is the moment. Attack." Jiang Yuanyi roared out loud. He swore that he had brought out 120% of his strength. Moreover, in this life or death crisis, the might of this strike was several times greater than his usual attacks. As his fist punched out, a deep rumbling sound echoed in his ears. He felt a stabbing pain in his arm, as if he had punched a thick iron plate. However, the most frightening thing was that with this punch, the suction force from the water in the well suddenly increased by a few notches. Jiang Yuanyi's heart shook and his complexion paled. Fear gushed out from his eyes. His first thought was that Qinyu had made a mistake. It was clear that right now, Qinyu was his only chance of survival. If his judgment was wrong, then he would die without a doubt. Put away your random thoughts. Although I don't care about your life or death, you still have value in living. Qinyu sneered. Now is the time. Punch out a second time. Although I don't care about your life or death, you still have value in living. Qinyu sneered. Now is the time. Punch out a second time. That's right, I still have value. Qinyu will not give up on me. Jiang Yuanyi didn't have time to think. He instinctively punched out a second time. Dong! With a dull thud, his ears began to ring and his field of vision darkened. The recoil of strength left his chest heavy, and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Bang! The suction force from the bottom of the well crazily rose. Jiang Yuanyi's sinking speed nearly doubled. He was like a stone that had been tossed into the water. The cold strength released by the black well water caused the layer of ice covering his body to instantly become incomparably thick. Even the blood flowing through his body seemed as if it would freeze over. There's still one final strike. Take out your trump card. As a second-generation young master with an extraordinary background, don't tell me that you don't have a trump card in this desperate situation. Now is the time for you to use your trump card. Qinyu said in a low voice, a dignified tone in his voice. Remember, this opportunity only lasts for an instant. If you can't grasp it, you will really be pulled to the bottom. Although I don't know what is down there, you will absolutely die a miserable death. It was unknown whether it was because the suction force was too strong or because of the ice sealing his body, but Qin Yu's voice sounded weak to Jiang Yuan's ears. Moreover, there was an ethereal feeling to it. But there was one thing he could not deny. If he couldn't grasp the timing of this punch, he would die a miserable death. Death was the greatest fear and resistance of all living beings in the world. Even if one fell into a hopeless situation, as long as there was a slim chance of survival, no one would give up. Moreover, this was Jiang Yuan, a second-generation young master with a formidable background. If he couldn't die, he had to live. In the pitch-black well water, within the thick ice, a brilliant light erupted from Jiang Yuan's eyes. This was his final attempt to survive in his despair. Trump cards, of course he had them. As Qin Yu said, if he didn't use them now, when would he? Bang! A powerful aura instantly erupted from his body. The thick layer of ice covering Jiang Yuan's body instantly shattered into countless pieces, each piece wrapped in a terrifying strength. They pierced through the well water and smashed into the walls of the well. With a loud rumble, the entire ground trembled. Azure flame crows surged out of Jiang Yuan's body, completely isolating him from all the outside world's influence. Unfortunately, this situation was only maintained for a short while. In less than a breath of time, the cold aura once again invaded. The blazing blue flames immediately dimmed. The light it released was unable to penetrate the pitch-black well water. It was firmly suppressed and stuck to the surface of Jiang Yuan's body. Jiang Yuan's complexion changed. His trump card had already been detonated. This blue flame was a deviant flame that existed in the world. After refining it into the body, it could allow a cultivator to release a strength that far surpassed their limits for a short period of time. Although there was only one chance to use it, and the deviant flame would dissipate afterwards, it was enough to reverse the entire situation in a hopeless situation. But now, it seemed that it had only managed to buy some breathing room for Jiang Yuan. Furthermore, this little bit of breathing space was quickly disappearing as time passed. At this speed, the deviant flame's strength would be exhausted in several breaths of time. And now, Qin Yu hadn't asked him to attack yet. Hurry, hurry. If he was any slower, there really wouldn't be anything he could do. Every breath of time seemed to be stretched and twisted, becoming especially long. The blue flames on Jiang Yuan's body were nearly extinguished. Attack! Jiang Yuan roared. He lifted his hand and punched forwards. This punch gathered all his despair and fear, as well as the remaining strength of the blue deviant flame. Kacha! A clear sound echoed in his ears. But at this moment, Jiang Yuan wasn't sure if his own bones had broken or if he had broken something. A violent feeling soon spread through his body. His bones had broken. Jiang Yuan's eyes filled with despair. But right at this moment, the pitch-black and ice-cold well water that enveloped him suddenly parted to the sides. Of course, this wasn't accurate. The truth was that the cold and darkness in the well water was rapidly dissipating. Jiang Yuan discovered that he was floating in the water several meters above the ground. The well water was incomparably clear and sweet. He was saved. At this moment, he cried out loud. It was unknown whether or not it was because his hand had been completely deformed because of the severe fracture. On the ground, beneath the black robes, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping both revealed looks of pleasant surprise. The formidable resistance they felt had now completely vanished. Glancing at each other, the two of them didn't hesitate to erupt with all the strength in their bodies. Bang! With a dull explosion, the entire private school trembled. A massive amount of well water gushed out from the mouth of the well, throwing the haggard Jiang Yuan into the air. Jiang Yuan was curled up into a ball, his face twisted as if he had been caught off guard. The well water had struck him in his vitals, leaving behind a sour taste in his mouth. "It's open," Xia Chun said with pleasant surprise. In truth, at this moment, Yu didn't need him to say anything. He could already feel the aura emitting from the well. An intense desire erupted from his body. It wasn't just his mortal body, but also his soul. Was this the source of that horrifying evil demon that was being suppressed? At this moment, Yu suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. A question rose in his mind. If this was really the case, then why did he have such an instinctive and intense desire towards the source of this evil demon? But at this time, Yu didn't have time to think about this. A light sigh echoed in his ears, one that was filled with helplessness and melancholy. He turned and looked at the silent teacher outside the rear courtyard. The teacher's pitch-black pupils were now expanding outwards. The moment his eyes met Yu's, they completely occupied his eyes. I already said that you would use the way to leave, so why didn't you listen to me? Greed will be the greatest original sin that will lead to your death. Yu's pupils violently shrank. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the ground, towards the well that had opened up a channel. Shwa! He leapt up and rushed into the well. He could clearly see the surface of the water from head to toe. But at this time, an icy voice sounded out in his ears. Yu, I admit that I did deceive you, but everything is over now. Deep fate descends. Bang! A terrifying aura instantly erupted. An unimaginably cold and gloomy current swept out in all directions, covering the entire rear courtyard. The world in front of Yu suddenly changed. The walls of the well turned crimson, and the surface was uneven and covered with mucus, as if it were the intestines of some terrifying giant creature. In the next moment, the channel violently twisted. Yu's complexion changed, and he stepped forwards. Bang! Mucus flew out and fragments rained down. Yu rushed out from within. His black robes had been corroded into tatters, and his exposed flesh and blood had turned red. He felt a slight stabbing pain. As far as the eye could see, the entire private school had changed beyond recognition. The sky was a murky, dark red, and the layers of clouds were rolling like a thick accumulation of blood. In the rear courtyard, the neatly planted vegetables were like the claws of a demon, constantly twisting and wriggling in the air. Shang Lingwei smiled. Deep in his eyes, there was an icy chill that couldn't be dispelled. As he looked at Yu, killing intent surged out from him. At this time, meeting Yu's gaze, he spread out his arms and his smile widened. Welcome to my world, the great and destined abyss that will occupy and rule this world. Bang, bang, bang. The crimson ground that seemed as if it had been soaked in blood suddenly broke apart. Several thick flesh and blood tentacles drilled out. The ends of each tentacle split open, revealing dense circles of fierce fangs. Like pythons, they howled through the air, aiming to bite at Yu. At the same time, the air around Yu suddenly became thick and sticky. A powerful oppressive strength filled the air with a sticky and slippery feeling. At the same time, he was completely suppressed. This was the abyss. Yu's complexion paled. This was caused by the uncontrollable fear in his heart. But fear didn't mean that he would just wait for death. As he looked at Shang Lingwei, there was a calm look in his eyes. Perhaps he had underestimated the strength of the terrifying abyssal creature that occupied Shang Lingwei's body. Or perhaps in the world of deep destiny, the abyssal creature's strength had been greatly increased. In short, Yu was certain that he couldn't resist his opponent's slaughter. Yin Feng and the other second-generation cultivators might not be weak, but at this time, they couldn't help him at all. But it wasn't as if he didn't have the strength to fight back. Within his chest, two hearts wildly beat, pushing his blood energy to rapidly circulate. Yu exerted strength in his fingers, and there was a light cracking sound in his hand. In the next moment, he threw it out. A walnut appeared in everyone's line of sight. In the midst of panic and fear, everyone who had placed all their hopes on Yu suddenly had stunned expressions. Their eyes widened with disbelief. Including Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping. Everyone was wailing in their hearts, despair in their eyes. Big brother, what are you doing? Is this how you, a person with a mysterious background and powerful background, should act in the face of danger? You threw out a walnut, and even opened it for someone else. Do you think you will like the taste of walnuts more and let us go? Or do you really want to use this walnut to smash him to death? Shang Lingwei furrowed his eyebrows. Although he wasn't too strong, he no longer dared to have any thoughts of killing Qin Yu. But this really was an incomparably ordinary walnut. He didn't feel anything wrong about it. Even then, Shang Lingwei was still unwilling to take the slightest risk. He raised his hand and flicked his sleeve, causing a ball of pitch-black abyssal devil chi to surge out from the void and transform into a large hand that grabbed onto the walnut. However, when the hand formed of abyssal demonic energy grabbed the walnut, Shang Lingwei's expression changed drastically. His eyes widened in shock. Without any hesitation, the power in his body erupted. Roiling black abyssal demonic energy descended and wrapped around his body. In the next instant, an extremely dazzling bolt of lightning shot out from the crack in the walnut. Mobile reading access. Chapter 1026. As he threw out the walnut and saw the shining thunder, Qin Yu's heart fiercely shrank, and he felt his entire body turn ill. This thing actually attacked indiscriminately. It didn't care about the existence of its master at all. Qin Yu didn't even have time to curse out loud. He didn't even have time to think before his body instinctively reacted in this dangerous situation. With a deep roar, the two hearts in his chest began to wildly beat. He stimulated his blood vitality to erupt, releasing the strongest strength of the ancient immortal body. In the next moment, raging thunder howled, submerging his figure. The rumbling in his ears suddenly disappeared. He was like a rag that was sent flying away, tumbling about. His consciousness buzzed, and he nearly collapsed. What followed was endless pain from his limbs and bones. This feeling was like he had been thrown into a rapidly spinning barrel of knives. Every time he spun, countless wounds would open up on his body. Moreover, these knives were covered in bright red chili oil mixed with a great deal of salt. Of course, this was only a very simple description. In truth, the pain it produced was 10 times, 100 times more terrifying. Within the thunder, Qin Yu's body was torn apart. He was sucked into the raging thunder and burned to ashes. But the attribute of the ancient immortal body was that it was nearly undying. As long as one's blood vitality wasn't exhausted, they could constantly be reborn. The result was that Qin Yu fell into the thunder, constantly repeating the process of destruction and rebirth. The pain he had to withstand seemed endless. If this was it, Qin Yu could still withstand it. After all, with his current will, it wasn't something that could be destroyed by the pain of destruction. What left him uneasy and even fearful was that the terrifying thunder that gushed out from the walnut was even faster than the ancient immortal body's rebirth. In this sort of situation, even if Qin Yu's blood vitality was abundant, once the ancient immortal body was completely destroyed, all that awaited him was death. The ancient immortal body was known as undying and indestructible. It required any part of the body to remain. Even if it was just a little finger, it could still be reborn. But once the entire body was turned to ash, he originally thought that the walnut in his hand was his trump card to kill his enemy and reverse the situation. But he never imagined that it would end up delivering his own life instead. How laughable! As Qin Yu was tormented by the thunder and nearing destruction, there was someone who was suffering even more than he was. However, the devastating roar of thunder drowned out his howls. The so-called abyssal descent was naturally not the true abyssal world. Rather, it relied on the powerful strength of the abyssal life forms to forcefully distort the world, turning it into the abyssal for a short time. Once completed, the strength of the abyssal creatures within would be greatly enhanced. In addition, the entire abyssal world would be under his control. He could control it with a single thought. It was equivalent to his own domain. However, everything in the world abided by some invisible law of balance. Such a powerful method naturally had its drawbacks. When the abyssal world endured a power that exceeded its limits, it would cause a terrible backlash against the abyssal life forms themselves. This was because, to a certain extent, the so-called abyssal descent was the extension and evolution of the abyssal creature's power. It was precisely because of this that the exploding walnut released a monstrous, destructive lightning. Although it was an indiscriminate attack, Xiangling Yu had withstood at least 80% of its power. This feeling could be understood as having a very thick firecracker placed in his stomach. Of course, the might of a walnut was thousands of times more terrifying than a firecracker. No matter how thick it was useless because the thunder released from this walnut had a terrifying name, the thunder of nirvanic extermination. What was nirvanic extermination? It was the deathly stillness of the world, the annihilation of all. Strictly speaking, this was a kind of thunder that didn't originally exist between the heavens and earth. It was something that relied on some medium to compress and fuse the power of thunder to the limit. Only then could one finally obtain it. Of course, those that had the qualifications to fuse and refine the thunder of nirvanic extermination weren't ordinary characters. Otherwise, just touching it would cause one's life force to be annihilated. Who would dare to touch it? Moreover, there was one more point. Countless years ago, when the world of life and the abyssal abyss first met, a great calamity erupted that swept through the world. At that time, the thunder of nirvanic extermination didn't exist. This was because this was a weapon of war created to deal with abyssal life forms. It could ignore the corrosion of abyssal demonic energy and erupt with an even greater killing power against abyssal life forms. Otherwise, with the strength of the abyssal life form that occupied Xiangling Yu's body, no matter how terrifying a walnut containing powerful thunder was, it wouldn't be able to cause much damage to him in the abyssal world. But now, the tumbling abyssal demonic energy stimulated the might of the thunder of nirvanic extermination. The entire abyssal world began to rapidly collapse. Xiangling Yu's body was nearly destroyed. All that remained was a black heart wrapped in a thin layer of flesh and blood that wildly beat. The thunder of nirvanic extermination. It was actually the thunder of nirvanic extermination. He didn't believe that this was just a coincidence. With Qin Yu's cultivation, he absolutely didn't have the qualifications to control it. Could it be that the erosion of the abyssal abyss in the myriad soul, Tao, had already been discovered by the world of life, and that Qin Yu was a chess piece they had placed down? But at this time, there was no more time for him to think. If he didn't escape from here soon, all that awaited him was death. Within the wildly beating heart, roars came out. "My lord, save me, save me." As the most optimistic junior powerhouse of the nightmare demon race, his goal was to grow into a supreme king amongst the abyssal races. He wanted to personally lead the brave warriors of the abyssal races to occupy the world of life and turn it into their pasture. How could he die? Of course he couldn't die. The entire backyard of the private school had already been completely abyssed. However, there was one exception. That was the wooden door that connected the backyard to the front yard. The teacher stood there with a calm expression, as if everything that happened around him had nothing to do with him. It was only at this moment that he heard Xiangling Yu's roars that he frowned. Then, he lifted a hand and pressed forward. The abyssal world was like a bubble at this moment. After being gently popped, it directly shattered into countless pieces, tumbling and disappearing. What disappeared along with it was the raging thunder of nirvanic extermination wrapped around the abyssal demonic energy and annihilated. Xiangling Yu, who only had a black heart left, didn't dare to stay any longer. Space twisted and he vanished from sight. The abyss shattered and the thunder dissipated. Xia Chun, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others who had barely survived felt as if they had passed through hell. They all lay on the ground, gasping for breath. If it weren't for the wounds caused by the raging thunder on their bodies, they would have suspected that everything they experienced just now was just an illusion. But this wasn't an illusion in the end. All of them looked up at the teacher, standing beside the black wooden door, endless fear and awe in their eyes. Just who was he? Putong. The sound of water falling sounded out, breaking the silence of the backyard. The teacher looked at the well. His black pupils were still pitch black, but they no longer had that heart-palpitating feeling from before. With a light sigh, he closed his eyes. Xia Chun, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others were left dumbfounded. Just what sort of method was this? By closing his eyes, was it because he didn't want to see them and wanted them to hurry up and scram? Or was there some other meaning? For better or worse, he should at least say something. They were stuck in this awkward situation. It was really uncomfortable. Of course, they only dared to think about these thoughts in their hearts, not daring to reveal them at all. As for leaving, haha, if this teacher didn't say anything, who would dare to take even half a step forward? The well water was cold. But as the cold seeped into his body, it caused the pain around him to weaken by a great deal. But Qin Yu was well aware that he had suffered a great loss this time. Although he hadn't died in the bombardment of the walnuts he had thrown out, it wasn't something he could recover from in a short period of time. Moreover, the most important thing was that the walnuts he had thrown out had nearly cost him his life, but he still hadn't been able to kill Shang Lingwei. Since Shang Lingwei hadn't died, he would come looking for revenge sooner or later, let alone his current half-dead state. Even if he were to return to his peak, he feared he would still die without a doubt. As Qin Yu was feeling bitter, a voice suddenly sounded out. It's not too late to leave now. Otherwise, you will most likely die. This voice Chua. Qin Yu's eyes shot open. He saw a phantom appear in the well water. Its face was blurry, but it gave him a familiar feeling. It's you. His pupils violently shrank. The phantom in the water frowned, as if he never thought that Qin Yu would be able to see through his true appearance. Ripples flowed, and the face became clear. Shockingly, it was none other than the teacher who was sitting there with his eyes closed. His expression was calm as he looked at Qin Yu. There are many secrets hidden on your body. Even I cannot clearly sense them. But my intuition tells me that if you continue to live, you will have an inestimable effect on the entire world of living beings. This is why I have reminded you again and again. This city is doomed to fall. Perhaps you have already guessed that the strength of the abyss has already corroded it. It has fused with me and cannot be separated. Take advantage of my lucid state to leave. Announce to the entire world of living beings that they will never attempt to enter the myriad soul Tao again. Qin Yu suddenly said, "This should be the second time we've met, right? You also appeared when I was participating in the Three Mountains test." The teacher was silent for a moment. "Your senses are sharp, so you should be able to judge that everything I say is true." Qin Yu said in a low voice, "You want to seal off the myriad soul Tao." The teacher had no expression. Since there is no other way, continuing to suppress the strength of the abyss is the best choice. He turned to leave. This was clearly a reminder to Qin Yu that he had no intention of staying. "Hold on." Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He stared at the teacher's back and said, "I want to know the secrets of the myriad soul Tao." The teacher didn't turn around. "This inheritance is wrong to begin with. I will not give it to you. No, I don't want the inheritance. I only want to know how to unravel the myriad soul Tao." Qin Yu bowed. This simple movement caused many wounds to open up all over his body. Blood gushed out and poured into the well water. But strangely, the well water wasn't dyed red at all. Instead, it simply vanished. "You want to unravel the myriad soul Tao. My wife is one of the split souls of a cultivator of the myriad soul Tao. I hope that she can continue living." The teacher said, "Give up. The myriad soul Tao is wrong. It is imperfect to begin with, and the fruit that is born from a wrong foundation is impossible to change." Qin, you didn't stand up. In this world, there are no absolutes. Even if they exist, they only exist within a certain relative range. So, the myriad soul Tao must have a way to unravel it. I beg you to help me. No matter what price I have to pay, I am willing. She's just a woman. Not to mention the many secrets you hide. With your current cultivation, you can obtain countless things with just a thought. Is it worth it to save her? Worth it. The teacher was silent. He seemed to be deep in thought. After a long time, he said, "Qin Yu, I might know of a way to unravel the myriad soul Tao. But you only have one chance. If you fail, you will be destroyed along with this city." From the bottom of my heart, I'm not optimistic about it. What you should do is to leave this place immediately. Now, tell me your answer. Qin Yu's eyes were cloudy and uncertain. He feared death, and if he could, he didn't want to be placed in a perilous situation. However, the teacher's words implied that he was trying to crack the myriad soul path. The difficulty seemed to be far greater than he had imagined. In other words, even if he obtained the qualifications to speak directly with the peach blossom spring in the future, he still wouldn't be able to rescue Ning Ling, apart from the method you mentioned. Is there any other way to crack the myriad soul Tao? The teacher was silent, and his silence was, in fact, an indication of his attitude. This was their only chance. Qin Yu took a deep breath. A decisive light flashed in his eyes. I must try. The teacher turned and looked at him with a deep gaze. If death comes, I hope you won't regret the choice you make now. Shua. His figure vanished from sight. In the next moment, a massive amount of blood red gushed out from the pure well water, rapidly spreading outwards. Bang! Bang! This was Qin Yu's two hearts wildly beating in his chest. It was an instinctive desire that came from his marrow and couldn't be suppressed at all. Without needing to galvanize it, all the pores on Qin Yu's body opened and wildly absorbed the blood-red strength mixed within the well water. In the private school's rear courtyard, the teacher opened his eyes. You may leave. Everyone was nervous and anxious, as if they had been granted amnesty. They let out a breath of relief, bowed, and hurriedly rushed out. If they didn't leave now, when would they? Wait. The teacher lifted a hand and pointed. The two of you stay behind. Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping stiffened. Although they didn't want to, their instincts told them that it was best not to resist. Or, even if they did resist, their fates would only be more miserable than they were now. Yin Feng and the others let out a long breath of relief. They didn't have time to express their sympathy to the two black-robed lords. They picked up the unconscious Jiang Yuani and rushed out. What nonsense! If they didn't hurry up and run, what if this person felt that there weren't enough people and called out to them again? As for the promise the two black-robed lords made, their lives were about to be forfeited, so why were they thinking about such things? The opening of the myriad soul Tao, this time, was truly strange. It didn't match the information that their family had provided them before. With this, even if their family blamed them in the future, they would be able to shirk responsibility and say that it was all because their information was wrong. It wasn't easy for them to survive. In fact, as Yin Feng and the others hurriedly ran out of the private school and swore never to approach this place again, they didn't know that it was indeed extremely difficult to survive in this city. Because true despair had yet to arrive. In a corner of the private school's rear courtyard, there were several bamboo chairs placed around. They should be used to temporarily rest while they worked. The teacher walked over and casually sat down. He looked at the neatly cleaned vegetable field in front of him. His face didn't reveal any emotion, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking. Xia Chun grasped Taoist Nun Taiping's hand, indicating with his eyes that she shouldn't speak any further. He took a deep breath and bowed. My lord, I am willing to stay behind and listen to your orders. Could you allow me to leave? Taoist Taiping's eyes widened. Xia Chun, shut up. Xia Chun roared out loud. He lifted a hand and pulled down his black robes. He respectfully knelt on the ground. If my lord agrees, Xia Chun swears to obey any order you give. The teacher glanced at him and expressionlessly said, Is Xiao Bo your ancestor? Xia Chun was startled. The awe on his face deepened, and he respectfully nodded. Then this woman is a descendant of the Sun family. The teacher had a faint expression. In the past, when your ancestors were building the myriad soul Tao, they were tempted by the abyss and left behind a contingency plan. This caused the power of the abyss to leak out, causing the entire myriad soul Tao to fall short of success. This crime is punishable by the execution of all 10 bloodline clans, and their souls will be drawn out and refined. Puff! Taoist Taiping's legs weakened, and she slumped to the ground. Beside her, Xia Chun wasn't much better. His face was pale white, and he was sweating profusely. Just now, When the teacher spoke, they felt as if they were standing on the edge of destruction. It was like they would fall into the abyss in the next moment and be torn to pieces, never to reincarnate. After an unknown period of time, the two of them regained their composure. They looked up at the silent teacher, and their pupils shrank in fear. At this time, there was the sound of splashing water. Qinyu flew out from the well and landed on the ground. As Xiachun and Daoist Taiping saw Qinyu, their eyes brightened. They subconsciously wanted to speak, but they held themselves back. Qinyu frowned. He didn't know why the two of them were here, but he guessed that it was the teacher's orders. He immediately suppressed his thoughts and cupped his hands together. Greetings, teacher. This person's identity was now clear. He was the self-condensed consciousness of the myriad soul Tao. Or it could be said that he was the current incarnation of this city. He had fused with the abyss, hiding the yin and yang sides of the abyss. What they faced now was the yang side of the city. Otherwise, with a wave of his hand, the three of them would likely be turned to ash. The teacher glanced at Qinyu and said, "There isn't much time left, so I will get straight to the point. Listen well. A long time ago, in the war between humanity and the abyss, humanity paid a tremendous price. Countless powerhouses perished, but in the end, they managed to slay a powerful king that descended from the abyss. But although its mortal body died, its soul still lived on. After research, they discovered that there was an enormous secret hidden within the soul of this abyssal king. Afterwards, the myriad soul Tao was constructed and the heavenly cycle array was laid down. The abyssal king's soul was suppressed here, and the power of the array formation was used to obliterate its soul and extract its source. Thus, this city was created, and the inheritance method of the myriad soul Tao was also created." The teacher's voice paused. But in truth, the original plan wasn't like this. They hoped to find someone to absorb and refine the source left behind by the abyssal king, so that they could replace his identity and return to the abyss. After all, for countless years, the world of living beings and the abyss have fought countless tragic wars, and even been on the verge of being destroyed and occupied by the other side. But what is laughable is that we know nothing about the situation within the abyss. Chapter 10:27. Xiachun and Taoist priestess Taiping's eyes widened. They looked at the teacher in front of them, beads of sweat covering their faces and their complexions pale. For the two of them to obtain approval and be allowed to enter the myriad soul Tao, they were naturally outstanding figures of their respective races. Their wisdom and shrewdness were both first class. Although there was no concrete evidence, with Qinyu's current attitude and the teacher's performance, it wasn't hard to guess his identity. Of course, the most important point was that because their ancestors had participated in the construction of the myriad soul Tao, they already knew that this city had its own will. As they thought about how the teacher had helped Shang Lingyue escape just now, in addition to the matter of the abyssal strength leaking out, the two of them felt a chill in their hearts. They felt as if they had fallen into an eternal pit of ice, as if all the blood in their bodies would freeze. Their ancestors had actually committed such a great sin. The teacher looked at the two of them. His eyes seemed to see through everything, and they seemed to pierce into the depths of their minds. "I'm keeping you two alive because you still have a chance to make amends for the sins of your ancestors. If you die because of this, then that is your fate." Qinyu took a deep breath. "Mister, you mean I should try a plan that didn't work before, and that is to refine the abyssal king's source?" The plan was certainly a plan that didn't work, otherwise the myriad soul Tao wouldn't be in its current state. Although he didn't understand anything about the great calamity of the past, he didn't need to be a genius to imagine just how tragic it was. It was unknown how many peerless powerhouses and stunning proud children of heaven perished in that great war. In the end, the king that descended from the abyss was cut down. To attempt to refine its source and dive into the abyss to see through the situation within was the will of the entire world of living beings. It could be imagined how many people had attempted to refine the abyssal king's source. Perhaps all of them were formidable characters that illuminated the world. But they had all failed. The reason for this was unknown, but the degree of difficulty couldn't be described with words. The teacher said, "This is the only way. I will do my best to help you suppress the Abyssal King's source. If you succeed and obtain the source, you will be able to perceive all the secrets hidden within its soul. Naturally, you will be able to find a way to unravel the myriad soul Tao. If you fail, I will activate my self-destruction and drag the Abyssal King's source with me into the endless nothingness where I will fall into an eternal slumber." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "I asked Mr. to teach me." The teacher stood up. "There is no need for me to teach you. When the source appears, you will naturally know what to do. Now we just need to wait." He strode out of the rear courtyard and beckoned with his hand. A private school student hurried over and bowed. "Mr. Su." His voice was respectful and his eyes were filled with admiration. "Tell the dean to dismiss all the private school disciples." The student widened his eyes in shock. "Teacher." The teacher didn't explain further. He waved his hand and said, "Go. The dean will understand what I mean." A short moment later, there was no one left in the private school, including the dean. Everyone bowed respectfully and left in a hurry. As he stood in the spacious front courtyard of the private school and gazed at the place where he'd lived for countless years, a trace of a complicated expression appeared in the depths of the teacher's eyes, and then it returned to calm like a quiet spring in the depths of the ground, without the slightest ripple. He didn't turn his head, but he seemed to see Qin Yu, Xia Chun, and Taoist priestess Taiping standing there quietly. He lightly said, "The strength of the abyss has been eroding this place since a long, long time ago. At the start, it was suppressed by me, and its progress was incomparably slow. But later I learned that this was only a deliberate strategy it used to numb me. Unfortunately, by the time I realized this, the situation had already spiraled out of my control. Strictly speaking, this city is already the will of the abyss holds the advantage. But I have the ability to drag it down with me in destruction. So for these past years, it has been patiently nibbling away at it, not daring to make any drastic reactions. I have tried to reverse the situation and seal it away once more. But all my attempts have ended in failure under the test of time." The teacher's eyes became increasingly indifferent. He is one with me, and no plan can be hidden from him. Since he knows that I have decided to take the final step, he certainly won't continue to patiently wait. Moreover, he now has a nearly perfect body, and now the abyss is about to arrive. In a courtyard in the northwestern corner of the city, a roar of suppressed pain came from it. The black heart wrapped in flesh and blood beat madly, releasing rolling waves of abyssal demonic energy that caused the flesh and blood to quickly regenerate. Gradually, it turned into a bloody body. Peepa, Peepa, lightning flashed on the surface of this body. Every time a large wound was torn open and blood splashed out. Thunder of Nirvana, thunder of Nirvana. With a roar, the bloody body's eyes widened. Because there was no skin covering it, the eyes were exposed, making them seem particularly horrifying. At this time, they were filled with endless hatred. Qin Yu, this damned human, he had to completely extinguish his soul and tear his corpse to pieces. The final thunder of Nirvana was forced out from his body. Skin rapidly regenerated on the surface of his bloody body. The naked Shang Lingyue lifted a hand and put on a black robe. Even though he looked as if he had recovered completely, his face was deathly pale, without the slightest trace of blood. Although he had managed to escape calamity in the end, he had also suffered terrifying wounds. Even if he returned to the abyss, he would need a massive amount of time to slowly recover. If so, then it would be impossible for him to complete the mission given to him by the clan. This would cause him to face a tremendous problem. But as long as he lived, there were infinite possibilities. Even if he gave up on this mission, he could still obtain the recognition of the clan in other aspects. However, if he wanted to kill Qin Yu, it would be a long, long time in the future. "You must live on and wait for me." His voice came to an abrupt stop. Shang Lingyue's eyes widened. He turned around and stared in the direction of the private school. His face was as pale as paper, without any trace of blood left. Impossible. How is this possible? He whispered to himself. He reached out a trembling hand, and the flesh on his palm suddenly split open, revealing a black crystal. Now, the surface of this crystal flashed with a crimson light. But he hadn't obtained the essence energy that the Lord had prepared for the abyss. So why would this communication talisman be activated? Fear rose in Shang Lingyue's eyes. A look of despair appeared on his face. When the communication talisman was activated, the clan would receive news that he had obtained the essence energy that the Lord had prepared for the clan. But now, if he couldn't bring the essence energy back to the clan, then what awaited him was an incomparably miserable fate. Even with his current status in the clan, it was impossible for him to be pardoned. How could the essence energy be taken away? With the Lord's will sealing it, it is impossible for it to be opened. Shang Lingyue's words were suddenly cut off. In his mind, Qin Yu's figure appeared uncontrollably. It was him. It had to be him. Qin Yu had opened the wooden door and controlled the thunder of nirvanic extermination. He had surpassed his expectations many times already. It wasn't impossible for him to do this again. Die. Shang Lingyue's expression was fierce. He suppressed the violent killing intent that surged in his chest. He was well aware that the most important thing right now wasn't to kill Qin Yu. It was to kill Qin Yu. Moreover, with the current situation, if he really fought with Qin Yu, it was unknown just who would die and who would live. I have a way. I definitely have a way. I can't let things end like this. Shang Lingyue stared at the ground. A look of struggle appeared on his face, but in the end, it turned into endless madness. Doing this might bring him endless troubles in the future, but the situation had already reached this step. So what if things collapsed? Qin Yu, you forced me. You forced me to do this. I will let you taste the most terrifying pain in the world and let you die in despair. Kneeling on the ground, Shang Lingyue began to chant. His deep and suppressed syllables echoed in the courtyard. At this moment, the air gradually became thick and a cold and in aura was released. Above his head, the light that shined into the courtyard suddenly dimmed, as if it was swallowed up. The Nightmare Demon race was a rare race in the abyss. They were born nobles and had a powerful and unique bloodline inheritance. In the past, the Abyss King that died in the world of the living was the strongest king of the Nightmare Demon race. Because of his background, Shang Lingyue, no, perhaps he should be called by his true Abyss name, Song Wu knew a secret related to the Nightmare Demon King. As someone with the bloodline of the Nightmare Demon race, after entering the Myriad Soul Dao, once he encountered an uncontrollable factor. He could borrow the strength of a Nightmare Demon King in a desperate situation and obtain unbelievable might for a short period of time. This was because the Nightmare Demon King had never truly died. Even when he was surrounded by the world of the living in the past, it was all part of a plan. But even the elders of his race that informed him of this strictly warned him not to use it unless he had no other choice. This was because this would ruin the great Nightmare Demon King's plan and even affect the plans of the entire Abyss. The world of the living has already sensed the Nightmare Demon King's plan. Even if I don't expose it, they will know. If that's the case, why don't I take action and completely destroy this city to help the Nightmare Demon King escape? At that time, this great merit may be able to offset my own great sin. Yes, that's right. This is my last chance. Shang Lingyue looked up. His eyes were now filled with pitch-black pupils that flashed with madness and cruelty. Great Nightmare Demon King, please hand your strength over to me. Allow me to release your anger and thoroughly burn down this city. Burn away the shackles placed on you by flesh and blood. Burn them to ashes. Bang! Black flames suddenly drilled out from the ground. They touched Song Wu's body and rapidly spread upwards, finally wrapping around his entire body. Ah, strength. This is my king's strength. No matter how strong it is, it will surpass all in this world and become an eternal existence. As Song Wu roared, fear appeared in his eyes. This was Shang Lingyue's consciousness that had been awakened from a deep slumber by the terrifying fluctuations of strength. Lowly servant, to be able to dissipate beneath my king's strength is the greatest honor of your life. Now, let this city tremble beneath my feet. Song Wu roared out loud. The fear in his eyes rapidly faded away. Or, to be more accurate, it was directly erased by the powerful strength surging within his body. Rumble, rumble. Loud rumbles fell from the skies. Billowing black clouds surged out, weaving together and forming a thick curtain that covered the city, bathing it in darkness. Abyss! Abyss! At this moment, all living beings within the city heard this ruthless and crazed roar. Thus, the abyss truly descended at this moment. Chapter 1028. The reason why the Abyssal Kings were so powerful was because they had obtained the recognition of the will of the Abyss. Perhaps this was a bit vague, but it could be said that the Abyssal Kings had obtained the might of the Abyss and had become a part of it. By borrowing the strength of the King of Nightmares, Song Wu was equal to the incarnation of the King of Nightmares when he reached his limit. He could use his own strength and summon the descent of the Abyss. The descent here was different from what had occurred in the private school's backyard, where the real world was distorted into the Abyss. A part of the will of the Abyss had directly descended here, turning the entire city into a part of the Abyss. Before the will of the Abyss retreated, this was the Abyss. On the street, behind a steamed bun steamer, the cleanly dress stall owner's mouth cracked open, revealing pale, white gums hidden beneath his flesh. Blood mixed with saliva dripped down. Customer, steamed buns. If you don't like it, it's free. How about one? He opened the steamer, revealing a human head inside. Although it was steamed to a pulp, it still hadn't died. Their facial features were twisted, and pained howls emitted from their mouths. The cultivator, standing in front of the stall, instantly paled. This was because he discovered that one of the heads in the steamer looked exactly like him. He lifted a hand and knocked the steamer over. Then, the cultivator hurriedly retreated. The stall owner's horrifying face instantly turned fierce. Where do you think you're going? Without you, how am I supposed to steam buns? Go and catch him for me. From the steamer that tumbled to the ground, the steamed head howled out. It constantly cried out, "Stay, stay," as it chased after the fleeing cultivator. A fierce face appeared on the thick trunk of the ancient tree. Its mouth was wide open and filled with fangs. It emitted a cruel and bloodthirsty roar. The roots that drilled deep into the earth had already been uprooted. After the abyssal assimilation, they had transformed into tentacles that coiled around each other like a giant millstone. With loud rumbling sounds, they moved the great tree. Thin and numerous branches grew long thorns at the ends. Even though it was shrouded in darkness, one could still clearly feel the cold light it released. They were like incomparably sharp limbs, stabbing at the crowd in a frenzy. A cultivator's body flashed with light, but he didn't expect this demonic ancient tree to be able to predict his dodging trajectory. The moment his figure appeared, a wooden spike pierced through his chest. Ah! He howled in pain. Although his body had been pierced through, the powerful life force of a cultivator prevented him from dying. In the midst of his struggle, a long sword appeared in his hand. A cold light flashed as it heavily chopped down on the wooden spike, producing a loud sound of metal clashing. A gash appeared on the sword, and a large part of the wooden spike had also been cut off. It seemed that one more strike would be able to cut it in half. However, the cultivator no longer had a chance to attack. Wooden thorns whistled toward him from all directions. In the space of a single breath, he was pierced through like a hedgehog. In the next moment, his corpse was dragged and sent into the ferocious mouth of the face that appeared on the trunk of the tree. Amidst the crisp, chewing sounds, blood gushed out recklessly. Yin Feng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others were pale. They were hiding in a house with a formation plate floating above their heads. It had already been activated, and the formation was added to the house itself to resist the impact from the outside world. Roar! Roar! The oppressive roar assaulted everyone's eardrums. The entire house trembled and creaked in pain. The windows had already been broken. Looking through the phantom array diagram, one could clearly see that the courtyard was now filled with countless fierce ghosts, crazily attacking the array formation's defenses. And they were well aware that these ghost-like people were originally harmless natives of this city not too long ago. When the abyss arrived, they were corroded by the power of the abyss. Or perhaps it could be said that they were lured out by the abyssal strength hidden within their bodies, transforming into abyssal creatures that destroyed all flesh and blood. Come out, you can't escape. I will catch you, tear you to pieces, and then eat you into my stomach bit by bit, turning you into a part of the abyss. Do not struggle any longer. You all know that all of this is meaningless. In the end, all that awaits you is death. Within the room, Yin Feng and the others paled. They had exhausted all of their abilities to escape here and activate this arrayed disc. Although they didn't know what had happened, they had experienced the transformation of the private school's backyard into the abyss, so they were well aware of what was happening in front of them. This entire city had become an abyss. Moreover, what was most terrifying was that the natives of the city had all transformed into horrifying abyssal creatures. There was no place that was safe. This was already their final place of retreat. But no matter how powerful the array disc was, it couldn't withstand the tide of abyssal creatures. Just how long could it last? Once the array disc broke, what awaited them was being torn to pieces. If someone were to fly into the skies and overlook the entire city, they would discover that it had become an amusement park for the devils. The abyssal creatures that had gone berserk began to wildly attack the cultivators that arrived, tearing them to pieces and cleanly eating them. But there was one place that was an exception. The private school in the southern alley of the city was now covered in a faint layer of white light. Although it wasn't strong, it clearly possessed an inconceivable might. It isolated the erosion of the abyss outside, allowing it to maintain its original appearance. The teacher, surnamed Su, stood in the empty front courtyard of the private school. Every pore on his body emitted light. He was the source of this light that covered the entire private school. He looked up at the pitch-black skies and slowly said, "Chinyu, remember, you only have one chance. If you fail, then you'll be buried forever with me." With one last glance at the familiar private school in front of him, the teacher closed his eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, the light that covered the entire private school held back. In the next moment, he turned into a mass of radiant light that flashed into Chinyu's chest and fused into his body. Bang! An incomparably powerful aura burst out from his body. At this moment, Chinyu felt as if he were the center of the heavens and earth. No, it was more accurate to say that the heavens and earth had to crawl beneath his will. With a single thought, he could control everything. Xiaochun and Taoist priestess Taiping's eyes widened, disbelief on their faces. This method of directly fusing strength surpassed their imaginations. To the two of them, Chinyu was like a blazing sun. Any tongue of fire that spat out was enough to burn them into nothingness. Could such a formidable strength not be enough to suppress the strength of the abyss? Just how terrifying was the strength of the abyssal king that was killed in the past? In fact, Chinyu would soon be able to unravel the shock and doubts in his heart. The strength of the Nightmare King was borrowed by Tsang Wu to temporarily incarnate into the abyssal king and summon a part of the abyssal world to descend. Thus, the strength of the abyss was barely separated from the city. This was why it could fuse into Chinyu's body and temporarily be used by him. But fundamentally speaking, the two sides were still in an inseparable state of fusion. Whoever obtained the final victory would be able to swallow the other. Of course, this was only under normal circumstances. It was clear that this city had the strength to destroy itself and drag the abyss into a deep slumber. Correspondingly, even if Chinyu won in the end, he didn't believe he could easily swallow the source of the abyssal king. However, it was clearly too early to consider these things. This was because only the victor would worry about how to digest the opponent's strength. Chinyu took a deep breath and looked into the distance. He could feel that powerful, cold, and endlessly cruel destructive fluctuation. Was this the strength of the Abyssal King? Although he had already guessed this, it was only now that he truly felt it that he understood just how terrifying it was. This was an existence that, even with Qin Yu's current state, he still felt a deep sense of dread in his heart. In fact, he even faintly felt as if he were being suppressed. Bang! A loud explosion rang out in the distance. Even though it was far away, it still penetrated through the eardrums and reached deep into the soul. Rumble, rumble. In the skies, thick black clouds wove together. They violently tumbled about, and an incomparably terrifying aura swept out in all directions. Within the entire city, countless beings that had completed their abyssal transformation shivered and fell to the ground. Their bodies shivered as they tried to stick close to the ground, expressing their awe and submission to the Supreme King. Roars like thunderclaps. Billowing waves of sound surged through the skies above the city. The abyssal creatures that prostrated themselves on the ground fiercely looked up. Their originally cold and bloodthirsty eyes became even crazier, because at this moment they received the will of their king, tear apart all life and destroy everything in front of them. This city that had imprisoned the strength of the abyss for countless years would be thoroughly destroyed today. The abyssal creatures that had been instinctively restraining their desires suddenly went completely berserk. Based on their instincts and their keen sense of smell towards flesh and blood, they crazily surrounded the cultivators in the city. A cultivator that was submerged in the sea of abyssal creatures revealed a look of despair. With a loud cry, the aura within his body instantly went berserk. In the next moment, with an earth-shattering explosion, his entire body completely exploded, shattering into countless fragments of his body. The terrifying power produced by the explosion tore apart the nearby abyssal life forms, destroying them along with him. But in the blink of an eye, the empty space created by the explosion was filled up with abyssal creatures once more. They crazily devoured flesh and blood. Whether it was the flesh and blood creatures that blew themselves up or their fellow clansmen that were torn apart, they were all chewed and swallowed. And this wasn't an isolated case. Within the entire city, as the abyssal creatures went berserk, nearly half of the cultivators had died in just a dozen breaths of time. As for the rest, such as Yunfeng, Jiang Yuani, and the others, they didn't have enough and could only bitterly hold on. If there wasn't a turning point with the current situation, they would soon all die one by one. Song Wu stepped through the void, his entire body burning with black flames. A sharp horn grew out of his head, and fine and exquisite lines appeared on the surface of his body. These lines covered every inch of his body, and he exuded a boundless majesty. His indifferent eyes were like those of a being that sat in the highest heavens, coldly looking down at the city that had now turned into hell. The essence energy that the king had prepared for his race had already been taken away. He wanted to take as little as possible to lessen the guilt he had to bear, so he naturally had to condense another portion of human essence energy. And in the city, these human cultivators that had entered with hope and ambition, as well as outstanding talent and strength, were naturally the best materials to condense essence energy. Of course, if he wanted to obtain the forgiveness of the abyss, a complete portion of human essence energy could only be considered a supplementary reward. A king that had escaped and returned to the abyss was the foundation of everything. Now, Song Wu was going to destroy the will of this city and completely swallow up all of his strength. This was the place he had arrived. In the skies above the private school, Song Wu's indifferent and icy cold eyes revealed a trace of fluctuation. He looked at Qin Yu on the ground and could feel the sun-like, terrifying aura that was released from his body. An icy cold, killing intent tumbled his chest, crazily rising at this time. It's him. It really is him. This lowly human cultivator was no different from a bug. He must have been a pawn sent into the abyss by the world of the living. As I thought, my guess wasn't wrong. Humanity has already sensed the changes that occurred in the myriad soul Tao. So, everything I did was correct. Qin Yu, all of the accidents and changes were caused by him. Die. With a deep roar, Song Wu lifted a hand and pressed down. Then, he would use Qin Yu's death and destruction to draw a perfect end to all of this. Chapter 1029. Qin Yu discovered something very interesting. Now, the strength of the Abyssal King that descended through Shangling Yue's mortal body was weaker than he expected. This wasn't too accurate. It should be that the strength that erupted from this abyssal creature wasn't as formidable as he had sensed. Qin Yu wasn't sure. Was it because the abyssal strength naturally suppressed flesh and blood beings, causing his senses to deviate? Or was it because this abyssal creature that descended through Shangling Yue's mortal body wasn't able to completely release the might of an abyssal king? But this wasn't important. What was important was that Qin Yu saw hope. He could kill this opponent and suppress the source of the abyssal king. He might even be able to refine and absorb it. Although it was still weak, as long as there was a chance and he fought for it with everything he had, there was always a chance of success. So, this was a very interesting matter. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, and a berserk and terrifying power twisted the space around them like two giant pythons. Massive tracts of abyssal energy exploded outwards, sweeping out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, a massive ring of emptiness was formed. The ground shattered and buildings collapsed. Some abyssal creatures that were attracted by the Abyssal King's aura were directly torn to pieces. Countless pieces of flesh and blood flew into the air, filling the air with the smell of blood. Qin Yu drew back again and again. Every step he took caused the ground to tremble and leave behind deep footprints. When he stopped at the last step, he couldn't help but frown. His feet that had sunk into the ground were now covered with blood-red tentacles. They were like the dense roots of a plant. They rapidly spread upwards. An extremely cold Yin aura was released. It was like a hair-thin needle that pierced into his flesh and blood, drilling deep into his marrow. In the blink of an eye, these blood-red tentacles had already wrapped around Qin Yu's legs, covering everything below his waist. Song Wu's eyes shook for a moment before he quickly composed himself. He laughed. The strength of this city struggling at death's door is indeed stronger than I imagined. But this is the abyss, a world that belongs to me. Moreover, your cultivation is far too weak. Even if you obtain strength fusion, how much of it can you display? He lifted a hand and grasped forwards, his fingers clenching. Now let me destroy this city. Bang! A dazzling light erupted from Qin Yu's body. The blood-red tentacles wrapped around him emitted pained screams and began to burn, turning to ashes in the blink of an eye. Bang! A deep thumping sound echoed out from the surrounding void. The dazzling light that covered Qin Yu suddenly caved in many places. Looking carefully, it formed a palm print. Sizzle! An ear-piercing corrosive sound came from the sunken area of light. Two diametrically opposed forces crazily collided in this small area. More and more abyss devil chi was exploding, forming wave after wave of terrifying waves that spread to an even larger area. The abyssal private school was completely destroyed in a few breaths of time, and a terrifying aura covered the entire city. The remaining cultivators who had been besieged by the abyssal creatures and were struggling to survive were overjoyed when they sensed this fluctuation. This power. Someone was fighting against this terrifying creature. Could it be that the outside world has already discovered the change in the myriad soul Tao? Great! If we persevere, we might not die today. I am a direct bloodline descendant of the Zhang family. I wonder which great lord has arrived. Please hurry and save me. The Zhang family will surely repay you. A cultivator cried out in ecstasy. But there were also some people who were able to guess the truth of the matter. Yin Feng, Jiang Yuani, and the others glanced at each other. Although no one spoke, they could guess what the others were thinking. The one who had acted today was that mysterious Lord Qin Yu. Perhaps the outside world really could sense the changes occurring in the myriad soul Tao, but it was impossible for them to respond in such a short period of time and send powerhouses to help. The only possibility was that it was that mysterious Qin that no one had ever seen through or understood. It was just that this degree of strength impact, even if it was only the aftermath, left their minds shaking and filled with despair. If they were directly struck by it, they would instantly vanish. Lord Qin was far more terrifying than they had imagined. If Qin wins, we might have a chance to live. Otherwise, we will surely die here. Yunfeng's eyes were cloudy and uncertain for a long time. Then, she took a deep breath and shouted, "We will activate the strength of the array formation and actively kill the abyssal creatures outside." Jiang Yuanyi's eyes widened. "Are you crazy?" Yunfeng said, "I am not crazy. Can you not sense that the ones fighting with Lord Qin right now are the same race as those abyssal creatures outside? Their strength comes from this terrifying demonic energy. The more we kill, the more demonic energy we can consume. Perhaps we might be able to help Lord Qin, although the effect might be limited. Even if we can only help a little, we must still help. Otherwise, once Lord Qin is defeated, even if the array formation still has some remaining strength, we will only be able to live for a little longer." "That's right. Yunfeng is right. We cannot just wait for death. Let's activate the strength of the array formation. Rather than waiting for death, we might as well kill as much as we can. Even if we can't escape today's calamity, it won't be a loss." After several breaths of time, the house that was being crazily attacked by the abyssal creatures suddenly erupted with a brilliant light. The power of the array formation condensed into sword shadows that wildly cut down in all directions. In an instant, dozens of abyssal creatures were cut to pieces. But these abyssal creatures were covered in abyssal demonic energy and possessed an incomparably potent vitality. Even though their bodies were torn to pieces, they still hadn't died. Part of the broken body was torn apart and devoured by other abyssal creatures, while the rest of the body was pieced together into a ball. Flesh sprouted from each other and grew together crazily, turning into a monster with 7 or 8 heads and dozens of legs and arms. "Damn it, you bunch of bastards. You actually ate my body. My arm, spit out my arm. And my thigh." The dozen-plus heads angrily roared. But at this time, the black curtain that covered the city began to wildly shake. An incomparably massive face suddenly caved in. It opened its eyes to reveal a pair of icy cold and cruel blood-red pupils that overlooked the entire city. Roar! The monster that had been formed from the broken limbs and dismembered body began to cry out in fear and alarm, as if it had sensed something horrifying. In the next moment, its massive body exploded. Its flesh and blood instantly withered and turned into powder that fell to the ground. Thick abyssal demonic energy condensed from its body and howled out. At almost the same time, the surrounding abyssal creatures began to self-destruct. Their mortal bodies were directly destroyed, and their abyssal demonic energy was stripped away. In the blink of an eye, the aggressive abyssal creatures had been annihilated and the outside world quieted down. Yunfeng and the others that were activating the array formation with all their strength were stunned for a moment before joy appeared on their faces. But soon this joy vanished. They turned towards the direction of the private school and felt an aura that left them in despair. Fear rose in their eyes. It wasn't that Lord Qin had won, but that the abyssal creature he had fought had plundered all the abyssal demonic energy in the city. Although this meant that Qin hadn't fallen into a disadvantage in his battle with this terrifying abyssal creature, the abyssal creature that had plundered all the demonic energy in the city would inevitably become even more terrifying. "What do we do?" Jiang Yuanyi's voice trembled. Yunfeng paled. "We can only wait." The abyssal demonic energy that came from the direction of the private school had already formed a terrifying vortex. Once they approached, with their strength they would instantly be torn to pieces. They wouldn't be able to help at all. Their fate now completely rested on Qin Yu's shoulders. Rumble, rumble. The vortex formed by abyssal demonic energy wildly spun in the skies, emitting heaven-shaking rumbling sounds. The flames on Song Wu's body blazed even hotter. Qin Yu, do you think you can win? Now be destroyed. Bang! From the center of the vortex, a terrifying pillar of demonic energy howled out, falling onto Qin Yu's head. It was like a towering mountain pressing down on Qin Yu. The radiant light that wrapped around Qin Yu began to constantly crack apart, emitting loud cracking sounds as if something was breaking apart. His complexion changed. Beneath this pillar of demonic energy, he was completely suppressed, unable to move at all. And the strength he obtained from the city could only barely guarantee that he wouldn't be destroyed by the pillar of demonic energy. Song Wu took a step forward and landed on the ground. His eyes were cruel and ferocious, but they also revealed boundless excitement and fervor. Now you can't escape. I'm going to eat you up bit by bit and imprison your soul for eternity. Only like this could he dispel the hatred in Song Wu's heart. He opened his mouth and fiercely sucked in at Qin Yu. Immediately, motes of light flew out from Qin Yu's body and into his mouth. The Abyssal Nightmare race had a special method of plundering. They could directly deprive an enemy of their strength. This strength didn't just refer to their cultivation, but also their flesh and blood and soul. As the motes of light fell into his mouth, Song Wu's eyes widened, filled with shock and disbelief. In fact, as his mind shook, he even temporarily stopped plundering and swallowing Qin Yu. This strength with your cultivation, how could you possess it? No, it's not your own strength. It's some sort of extremely heaven-defying good fortune that's hidden inside your body. Ha ha, ha ha. This is an unexpected harvest, a great harvest. I originally thought that even if I successfully rescued my king, my cultivation would suffer setback. I never imagined there would be such a pleasant surprise in front of me. As long as I swallow you, I will definitely be able to break through my current boundary. I might even go a step further and reach the level of a near king. At that time, the entire abyss will recognize me, and there is an extremely high chance I will become the new king of the nightmare race. Song Wu's heart began to fiercely beat, revealing an increasingly greedy heat. In any abyssal race, a race was only allowed to have a single king. Only when the previous king perished could a new king be born. If the king truly resurrected and returned to the abyss, then the first one he would kill would be Song Wu, who could threaten his position. So, if he wanted to become king, he would have to make the current king completely disappear. As this thought appeared, Song Wu's entire mind shivered. The suppression and submission in his bloodline left him feeling uneasy and fearful. But soon, this fear was completely burned away by the raging flames of ambition. Because this was his once-in-a-lifetime chance to swallow Qin Yu, seize the good fortune within his body, and obtain the recognition of the abyss. Then he could seize the king's strength and have him and this city thoroughly disappear. And he, Song Wu, would replace Qin Yu and become the new king of the nightmare race. He would step into the highest level of the abyss and possess the ability to control the will of the abyss. From there, he would realize his life's greatest dream. He would lead the abyssal races to occupy the world of the living and turn all flesh and blood living beings into lambs to be slaughtered under the rule of the abyss. That's right. I am doing this not just for myself, but to accomplish the great goal of the abyss that has ruled over the world of the living for countless years. So, everything I am doing is right. My king, please hand over your strength to me. I will definitely fulfill your wish. After firming his heart, Song Wu's eyes became even more blazing hot. He stubbornly stared at Qin Yu. This was because everything he considered had to be built on the foundation of swallowing Qin Yu. And now, it seemed that this was only a matter of time. Chapter 10:30. That would be very boring. In particular, Qin Yu discovered that he didn't have the slightest ability to resist Song Wu's swallowing and plundering. He was a fish on the chopping block. He wasn't placed on the chopping block, but had been ruthlessly chopped in. This feeling of helplessness and despair wasn't a good feeling. But despair was despair. He absolutely wouldn't give up. As long as he wasn't dead, he couldn't give up. A turning point might come in the next moment. He crazily stimulated the strength of the city that fused into his body to reduce the speed at which it was being plundered. But at the same time, Qin Yu's heart began to turn cold. He could control the strength of the city, but it wasn't completely under his control. This was because in Qin Yu's perception, while the strength of the city couldn't break through the suppression of the abyssal demonic energy, it should at least be able to ensure that he wasn't harmed. It shouldn't be like right now, where he could only fall into despair and wait for death to arrive. Under the cover of the sun and moon force field, Qin Yu had great confidence in his own perception abilities. He knew this wasn't an illusion. In other words, the strength of the city that fused into his body was holding back. But what Qin Yu couldn't understand was why he was doing this. If Qin Yu was swallowed by Tsang Wu, then the strength of the city that fused into his body would return to the abyss and vanish into thin air. There was a problem. There must be some secret that Qin Yu didn't know about. His thoughts raced. In the blink of an eye, a thought flashed through his mind. The abyssal king's strength that this abyssal creature controlled wasn't complete to begin with. This was the same situation he faced. Was it just a coincidence? Or perhaps this was the key. In today's situation, when he was on the verge of death, Qin Yu certainly wouldn't believe that this was just a coincidence. If this really was the key, a chill gushed out from the depths of his heart. Qin Yu stiffened, as if he had fallen into an icy lake. He suddenly thought of an incomparably terrifying possibility. If this was really the case, then he feared he wouldn't be able to escape death today. Ha ha! Qin Yu, you will vanish into thin air and become a part of my body. Now, hand over all of your strength to me. Tsang Wu excitedly roared, a blazing heat surging in the depths of his eyes. He opened his mouth and sucked in a deep breath. The motes of light that flew out from Qin Yu's body suddenly rose. But at this time, a change occurred. Tsang Wu's mouth was still wide open, but the swallowing strength that erupted from it had vanished. Excitement, agitation, greed, and other emotions froze on his face. His eyes were filled with panic. At this moment, he lost control of the power in his body. An ancient and cruel consciousness gradually awakened. We seem to have an unexpected harvest. A low, slow voice resounded in the void. Layers of fluctuations appeared, and a black ball of light appeared. Vaguely, one could see a blurry face inside the ball of light. It was like a god soaring above the 9 heavens, cold and indifferent. Now, his eyes were tightly locked onto Qin Yu. Deep in his indifferent eyes, there was a burning heat that couldn't be concealed. You're too impatient. We should wait a little longer. Amidst the spatial fluctuations, a white ball of light appeared, followed by a calm voice. This voice, Qin Yu's heart shrank. He stared at the white sphere of light. A face appeared from within. It opened its eyes and looked at Qin Yu. It lightly said, "You are smarter than I imagined." Qin Yu's lips moved, but he discovered that he couldn't make a single sound. The strength of the city that had fused into his body had turned into a terrifying imprisonment that thoroughly suppressed him. Indeed, what he guessed was the truth. This city and the abyssal king suppressed beneath it had already reached some sort of agreement. A cold laugh echoed out from the black ball of light. Agreement? Of course not, because I am him and he is me. Qin Yu's eyes widened. The white ball of light suddenly expanded, turning into a phantom. It was the teacher who had already disappeared. His expression was calm. Before, I once told you that after the Abyssal King was killed, the world of living beings' initial plan was to refine and absorb its source energy to replace its identity and enter the abyss. In this way, they could know themselves and their enemies and explore the abyss. In truth, not everyone failed. For instance, I should be considered half successful. The black ball of light flashed and turned into another teacher. The two were completely identical, except that their expressions were icy cold and their black robes were as black as ink. He became me and I became him. But what a pity we were unable to complete our fusion because we lacked an important medium. In order to avoid being discovered by others, We constructed the myriad soul path to conceal this secret and wait for that medium to appear. The teacher pointed at Song-woo. He is a nightmare with a pure abyssal bloodline. Because of certain reasons, we could not continue to wait, so we chose him to become the medium. Of course, he is only the most important part of the medium, and you are also a part of it. The black-robed teacher licked his lips. But surprises always come too suddenly. Originally, the medium that the two of you formed wasn't perfect. Even if you managed to help us complete our fusion, it would have left behind considerable drawbacks. But now, a strength that leaves even us startled has appeared on your body. The teacher said, "We do not know what sort of existence the strength you possess is, but as long as we can seize it, we can truly become one." Hee. The black-robed teacher's lips curled up in a smile. I've said so much because I hope that you can die with understanding. Moreover, to become a part of our long and grand plan is your greatest honor. Secondly, it's because we need time to adjust the plan and determine your role. Now, everything has been perfected. The teacher nodded. He looked at Chinyu. You will become the new medium's main body. You will strip away everything from this nightmare's bloodline and forge a body that is completely suitable for fusing with us. Let's begin. I've waited far, far too long. I can't wait any longer. Then let's begin. Within Chinyu's body, the city's strength suppressing him suddenly revealed a fierce expression. It was like a python that had awoken from its slumber and opened its bloody jaws. Song-woo cried out in pain. Billowing abyssal demon energy gushed out from his body, forming a raging river that wildly poured into Chinyu's body. Abyssal demon energy was the nemesis of flesh and blood to begin with. Once it came into contact with it, it would produce a terrifying corrosive effect. On the surface of Chinyu's body, all of his exposed flesh and blood turned pitch black in the blink of an eye. Then, the surface rapidly decayed, turning into pitch-black mucus that dripped to the ground. But at this time, the city's strength that had fused into his body and formed a formidable cage began to fuse into him on its own initiative. It was like a simple and effective neutralizer. It perfectly offset and annihilated the damage that the abyssal demon energy brought to his flesh and blood. In the end, all that was left over was a black gold strength that flowed through Chinyu's body, fusing into him little by little. But this process wasn't as beautiful as it seemed. Although the city's strength counteracted the corrosion of the abyssal demon energy, it still increased by 10 times or even 100 times. Chinyu is currently withstanding a great deal of pain. It felt as if an abyssal creature was being forcefully stuffed into his body. Every inch of his flesh and blood would be split open from the middle. Roaring was an effective way to vent one's pain. Although it couldn't truly reduce the excruciating pain one had to bear, it could still make one feel a little more relaxed on a psychological level. Unfortunately, Chinyu couldn't even make the slightest expression right now, much less make a single sound. He could only allow the trembling flesh and blood on his face to portray an indifferent and terrifying image of himself. The teacher looked at Chinyu. Your ability to withstand pain is also stronger than I imagined. In normal circumstances, your consciousness should have collapsed by now. Perhaps you really should give up. At the very least, you can make yourself suffer less pain. The black-robed teacher smiled. This is humanity. You always harbor some lowly and worthless thoughts. You believe that man can conquer the heavens, but man is man, so how can you resist the heavens? Today, you're destined to offer your everything to us. Thump, thump. The two hearts in Chinyu's chest wildly beat, as if they would explode in the next moment. Black blood vessels appeared in his chest, weaving together and stabbing into the two hearts. The violent heartbeat couldn't be covered up. Gulp, gulp, gulp. After plundering the strength of the two hearts, the black blood vessels began to grow at an even more astonishing speed. Soon, a new heart was born. Its entire body was pitch black, but its surface shimmered with a faint metallic luster. After an unknown period of time, it finally began to beat. Thump! A third heartbeat sounded out from Chinyu's chest. His pupils suddenly turned even darker. It was like they had been dyed with ink, like they had been thrown into the endless darkness of night. After being dyed for tens of millions of years, there was no longer any impurities left. Across from Chinyu, Sangwoo emitted a howl of despair. Then his entire body shattered, and he vanished from sight. All of the abyssal demon energy, all of it, had fused into Chinyu's body. The black-clothed teacher's eyes widened, a look of infatuation in his eyes. Perfect, it is even more perfect than I imagined. By fusing with the strength of the abyss and maintaining the body of a flesh and blood life form, we will become gods that wander between two worlds, finally reaching a transcendent realm. Let's begin the fusion. The teacher remained calm. Shwa, shwa. The two of them stepped forwards at the same time. Their figures turned into black and white spheres of light that drilled into Chinyu's body. Bang! Blazing flames burst out from his body. What was strange was that these flames used the space between Chinyu's eyebrows as a boundary. The left half was pure white, and the right half was pitch black. But this situation didn't continue for too long. The space between Chinyu's eyebrows was the boundary between the two opposing flames. Then, with Chinyu's body as the foundation, it formed a spinning vortex of flames. However, the black and white colors were still distinct, as if there was an invisible boundary between them that completely separated the two. Chinyu opened his eyes. His left eye was pure white, and his right eye was as black as an abyss, both icy cold. You are me, so why don't you fuse? I also want to ask you this question. A question and an answer came from Chinyu's mouth. Strangely, the air around him seemed to condense into essence. An invisible pressure flooded every inch of space. It was like a towering mountain had arrived, suppressing all directions. Bang! Without any warning, the perfectly spinning black and white flames suddenly shook. Two fire dragons drilled out, one black and one white, crazily slaughtering each other, tearing at each other with all their might. You are me, and I am you. But in truth, I am me, and you are you. Even if their essence was the same, they had different consciousnesses. Neither of them was willing to dissipate. Thus, who would be the true leader in the end? Only a battle would be decided. Far away, drifting in the nothingness of space, there was a world that gradually condensed, shining with the only light. At the center of this world, within a towering temple, a figure let out a long breath. He muttered, I knew that boy Chinyu's luck would be so good. He wouldn't be killed off like this. The turning point has finally appeared. But in truth, he had already prepared for the worst-case scenario. Once Chinyu was killed, he would sever their connection. With this basically completed world, he would have a certain foundation. Perhaps he would fall into a long period of weakness, but he wouldn't fall into a deep slumber. Of course, this was only the worst-case scenario. As long as there was even the slightest possibility, he hoped that Chinyu could continue living. It wasn't just because of their close relationship. There was also an extremely important objective factor. From Chinyu, he could see the possibility of stepping into the highest heights. Although it was weak, it was still commendable. In this world, there were countless so-called breathtaking geniuses, but if one disregarded their background, there weren't many that could compare with Chinyu at the same boundary. With a deep breath, the phantom of a great sun suddenly descended. In the skies of this world, the sun that illuminated all things seemed to echo in response. The light it released suddenly brightened. Since the turning point had appeared, he certainly wouldn't allow himself to make any mistakes. Moreover, if he could succeed, then this hopeless situation would turn into another harvest for Chinyu. Even the little blue lamp didn't know just what this harvest meant to Chinyu. The black and white fire dragons crazily slaughtered each other, trying to swallow each other up. But the premise of all of this was that only one of them could become the final victor. For the sandpiper and clam to fight and the fisherman to profit, this was something that neither side could accept. Thus, as the two fire dragons fought, their first choice was to thoroughly destroy Chinyu's consciousness. And the destruction of his consciousness meant that his soul would wither and be destroyed. All that would be left over would be an empty shell that would serve as a medium to carry them. The shaking black and white flames were like monstrous waves, crazily sweeping through every inch of Qin Yu's body. Any one of these levels of strength was enough to instantly destroy Qin Yu's consciousness, much less in this situation where the waves continued endlessly. Thus, after sensing that Qin Yu's soul aura had disappeared, the black and white dragons never imagined that he would still be able to survive. This was Qin Yu's only chance of survival, and also the variable that the little blue lamp spoke of. This was because he possessed the sun and moon force field, allowing him to transcend the world. And within his soul space, there was something that seemed ordinary, but actually had a great background. The cosmic sea-cross bell. Ever since the purple moon and blue sun met and formed the sun and moon force field, the main will of the bell, the self-proclaimed beautiful little girl, had fallen into a deep slumber. Of course, the term slumber wasn't strictly speaking accurate, because during this process, its strength had constantly increased. Perhaps it could be called a revival. In short, the current cosmic sea-cross bell hadn't changed much from its previous appearance, but its might was on a completely different level. Qin Yu's soul was currently hidden within. The sun and moon force field had shrunk into a ball, sticking close to the cosmic sea-cross bell as it shrunk to its strongest defense. If it were only like this, then the sun and moon force field would still be discovered. This was because whether it was the Abyssal King that suppressed the true city or the one who built the myriad soul path in the past, they were once the most terrifying and formidable existences in the world. But Qin Yu didn't only have these cards in his hand. The aura of the Jade Egg was the key to his ultimate ability to conceal himself. It wrapped around the cosmic sea-cross bell, its body seeming like nothingness, forming a circle of absolute concealment. Unless black and white finally completed their fusion and occupied Qin Yu's mortal body, it would be impossible to discover Qin Yu's soul that still existed. In all dangers in the world, a turning point might exist, but whether or not one could grasp it depended on whether or not one's own accumulations were deep enough. Of course, what Qin Yu needed to thank the most was the white and black that were fighting each other, neither willing to dissipate. If they were truly of noble character and unquestionable integrity, or if they kept their original promise and directly completed their fusion, then Qin Yu would have nowhere to hide, and his only fate would be destruction. Even if he had the little blue lamp and many other cards in his hand, this was still an unchangeable fate. As black and white desperately fought, Qin Yu's soul escaped into the cosmic sea-cross bell. He was waiting for his only chance to attack. It turned and, in a flash, drilled into Qin Yu's body, vanishing from sight. The white dragon let out a low roar and followed closely behind, entering the flesh as well. The black fire dragon drilled into the black metallic luster condensed from the power of the abyss, the third heart that could be called the heart of the abyss. In the next moment, a berserk abyssal power erupted. The heart of the abyss madly throbbed as countless runes condensed from demonic energy howled out. Every rune was like a miniature abyssal creature, one that crazily chased after Qin Yu and swallowed his bloodline, condensing into a golden rune. Every time it devoured one, the heart of the abyss's control over its body would grow a little stronger. Even though the increase was so small that it was negligible, in the current situation, any advantage could become the key to victory. The heart of the abyss had already attacked, so the other one certainly wouldn't sit still and wait for death. The white dragon broke into the ancient's heart, and countless white runes erupted with it. What was different from the abyssal runes was that the white runes didn't choose to swallow Qin Yu's bloodline runes. Rather, after touching them, they fused together. But whether it was swallowing or fusing, the result was the same for Qin Yu. The black and white dragons were seizing his bloodline to increase their chances of victory. A trace of horror instinctively rose up from his soul. Without any reason, Qin Yu naturally knew that he couldn't sit back and watch as his bloodline was completely stolen away. Otherwise, the backlash from severing his bloodline would be enough to cause his soul to fall into a state of absolute weakness. At that time, even if he waited for the perfect opportunity to attack, he would lose all ability to fight. He had to attack ahead of time. Chinyu took a deep breath. Before he could speak, the space within the cosmic sea-cross bell suddenly collapsed inwards, and the phantom of a great sun appeared in the pitch-black darkness. The little blue lamp's thoughts fluctuated. Chinyu, you originally had a better chance, but in this world, there is nothing that completely follows your own will. What should I do? As expected, the little blue lamp wouldn't sit back and watch him die like this. Although this fellow had been hiding for some unknown reason, it still wouldn't drop the ball in a critical moment. I will attack, and the strength hidden within your body will erupt. None of this needs your guidance, because when you face the abyss, they will instinctively resist. But remember, whether or not you can survive in the end will depend on yourself. The little blue lamp was silent for a moment. Then it continued to say, do your best and don't let yourself die. If you really cannot escape this calamity, I guarantee that in the future I will take revenge for you. Chinyu was expressionless. I won't die. He still had too many wishes, too many unwillingness. How would he die like this? No matter who it was, whether it was the king of the abyss or the supreme elder who created the myriad soul Tao in the past. So what? If he didn't want to die, then none of them could kill him. This wasn't some brainless arrogance or pride, but an obsession that strengthened his heart. If he didn't even have an obsession to live on, then how could he survive in such a dangerous and hopeless situation? Dong, dong, dong. Within his chest, 3 hearts wildly beat. The heart of the abyss that had fused with the black fire dragon began to dance with black flames. This was the burning of abyssal demonic energy, releasing swallowing black runes that wildly swallowed up the strength of his bloodline. After fusing with the ancient's heart of the white fire dragon, the white runes rapidly fused together. The golden bloodline runes turned pure white in the blink of an eye. Chinyu's own heart continued to beat quickly, but gradually became weaker and weaker. It contracted and expanded, becoming sluggish. This was because the strength of his bloodline was rapidly fading away. It was on the verge of drying up. Ding-ling-ling. The ringing of a bell suddenly resounded, and it was clear and oppressive. When it entered the ears, it was like a few large stones had been stuffed into one's chest, and it was filled with a burning sensation that caused every single breath to become extremely difficult. The soul didn't need to gasp for breath, but what this bell's sound targeted was precisely the soul. This was because it came from the cosmic sea-cross bell, a treasure that originated from a mysterious land. Its background was far more formidable than what Chinyu knew, and it was a supreme soul treasure. If the wills of the black and white fire dragons existed within their bodies, then even the strength of the cosmic sea-cross bell wouldn't be able to easily shake them. But now, they had abandoned their ruined bodies and entered Chinyu's body, only retaining the purest strength of their soul. This allowed the cosmic sea-cross bell's strength to be displayed to its greatest degree. As the bell sound entered his ears, the beating of the heart of the abyss and the ancient's heart paused for a brief moment. Then, the black and white fire dragons emitted deep and pained roars. With their strength, the moment the cosmic sea-cross bell attacked, it had already sensed the aura of Chinyu's soul. In their eyes, the soul of a weak human cultivator was like a candle that could be casually extinguished. Yet, it had remained hidden until now and had even inflicted a certain degree of damage upon them. Although it wasn't serious, the black and white fire dragons felt as if their dignity had been challenged. Of course, what was even more important was that they actually felt a threat from Chinyu's soul aura. One couldn't help but acknowledge that these old antiques that had lived for endless years had a powerful and keen intuition. Moreover, they firmly believed in their own judgment. This was because over the countless years, they had verified the accuracy of their intuition many times. Thus, the moment they sensed Chinyu's soul aura, the black and white fire dragons made the same decision. They would stop fighting and erase this boy's soul first. Chapter 1032. The black and white fire dragon's senses were sharp and accurate, but they underestimated the impact of Qin Yu's soul. This was because what he needed to do now was suppress all the heretical forces that invaded his body and swallow and refine them. Since he had to use his full strength, the soul impact from the cosmic sea crossbell was only the beginning. It was only the weakest of the several forces hidden within Qin Yu's body. Within his soul space, the purple moon and blue sun that rose in the east and set in the west simultaneously shined with light, releasing boundless fluctuations of strength. They galvanized the entire sun and moon force field. Like the tides of the sea, they violently rose and fell, carrying with them a vast strength that swept out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the ancient's heart and the heart of the abyss were wrapped in layers, forming a terrifying impact that howled outwards like invisible blades. The sun and moon force field itself transcended the heavens and earth. The impact formed from its vibrations also belonged to the level of the world beyond. Thus, no strength within the scope of the world could resist it. In a way, it had the attribute of ignoring all defenses, and its killing might was terrifying. From within Qin Yu's body, there was a series of crackling sounds. The black and white that were crazily swallowing and assimilating the bloodline runes suddenly broke apart like bamboo in a raging fire. Dong, dong! The ancient's heart and the heart of the abyss violently shook. With pained roars, the phantoms of the black and white fire dragons appeared. Their eyes widened in shock. Strength beyond the world. With Qin Yu's cultivation, he was actually able to release such a degree of strength. This far surpassed their imaginations. In truth, this had nothing to do with arrogance or carelessness. Rather, according to common sense, it was impossible for Qin Yu to control strength beyond the world. To transcend the world and not decay with the sun and moon, this was a kind of transcendence of life. It represented a great liberation, a great sublimation. Even in their heyday, they hadn't been able to cross this threshold. They were still some distance away from transcending the world. Even so, this didn't mean that the black and white fire dragons didn't have the ability to resist the impact of this strength. Every abyssal king stood at the peak of the abyssal races. They had the qualifications to obtain the recognition of the abyss and inherit a portion of its might. And the abyss was an existence that stood in opposition to the world of living beings. It was like a projection of the world on the other side, eternal and inextinguishable. As long as the abyss wasn't destroyed, the abyss king who had inherited the power of the abyss would be almost immortal. Even if their mortal bodies were destroyed and their souls were torn apart, they could still be nurtured for countless years and return from the abyss. A long, long time ago, there was a brilliant cultivator with grand ambitions who attempted to refine the soul of the abyssal king. The specific process was unknown, but in the end, he succeeded halfway and fused with the abyssal king, becoming inseparable. Even though the two of them had never truly fused together due to the lack of a suitable medium, they still possessed the same undying attribute. The unworldly power that erupted from the sun and moon fields had indeed caused great damage to the black and white fire dragons. However, as their bodies were being destroyed, they were still constantly recovering. Of course, the recovery speed was slower than the shattering. If the sun and moon force field could unleash an even stronger force, or if it could last longer, it could slowly grind the black and white fire dragons to death. But unfortunately, with Qin Yu's current cultivation, he couldn't truly control the sun and moon force field, nor could he stimulate the impact of the unworldly power. The eruption at this moment was only because the sun and moon force field had sensed its master's determination to perish together with him. Thus, it was bound to be unable to last for long. Moreover, after this, the purple moon and blue sun would fall into a weakened state for a long period of time. Qin Yu, The secrets hidden within this junior's body are far greater than anything we can think of. If we can seize his body, we can take that final step and completely transcend the world. Afterwards, we can break free of the limits of our lifespans and enjoy true immortality. The white fire dragon roared. Its eyes remained calm, but beneath this calmness were tumbling undercurrents. This was because, to them, this was far too critical. In the imagination of the black and white fire dragons, they would use this step of fusing together to allow their own level of life to finally transcend. But now, a shortcut had appeared in front of them. After seizing Qin Yu's body, their lives could transcend. Then, when they fused together, the massive increase in energy would be enough to allow their cultivation levels to rise even further, infinitely approaching the true peak boundary of this world. This good fortune was enough to move the hearts of any living being in the world, to the point where they would go crazy for it. Swallow him, completely swallow him. We must plunder away all of this human strength. The black fire dragon roared, naked greed surging in its eyes. The existence of the cosmic sea-cross bell had already surpassed their expectations, and the impact of the unworldly power far surpassed their imaginations. This shouldn't have been an existence that Qin Yu had the qualifications to touch. In their eyes, this was his limit. As long as he could make it through, he could eat to his heart's content. Of course, this wasn't to be underestimated, because Qin Yu had already brought a sufficiently powerful psychological impact to the black and white fire dragons. It was just that in this world, there were always some things that couldn't be deduced with common sense. For instance, when facing Qin Yu, the black and white fire dragon's judgment wasn't wrong at all. They simply didn't know who they were facing. Indeed, in terms of cultivation, Qin Yu simply didn't have the qualifications to be compared with them. Even today, when he was far from his peak state in the past, any one of them had the strength to easily erase Qin Yu. But in terms of trump cards, even if the two of them were added together, they still couldn't compare with Qin Yu. He was indeed an anomaly in the world. He should have died, but he chose to live on. He was destined to live an ordinary and humble life. But because of the foot-long sea blue light, he rose up. When a grass root lived for a long time, it would become tough enough. If it wasn't tough enough, then that was because it hadn't lived long enough. Qin Yu was prepared. He wanted to be the longest living grass root in the world. In the end, he wanted to possess the strength to easily tear apart the world. So, he certainly wasn't prepared to die. He wasn't prepared to hand over his strength and obediently allow it to be swallowed up. They wanted to plunder all of his strength. Then it would be rude not to reciprocate. Let's see who will have a last laugh today. After stepping out from the cosmic sea-cross bell, Qin Yu's soul instantly returned to his mortal body. He could clearly feel the two incomparably terrifying strengths that had broken into his body. Once released, it would be enough to instantly tear his entire body, including his soul, to shreds. If he didn't want to die, then the only way was to suppress this strength forever, or take it for his own use. Suppressing it forever was impossible. Then, there was only one choice. Qin Yu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In that instant, his thoughts fused into a towering existence. It connected the heavens and earth, pure and flawless. It was like a sparkling and translucent jade that stood in the vault of heaven and earth. When he opened his eyes again, at this moment, he was the jade and the jade was him. Qin Yu could feel that what he possessed right now was a vast and endless strength that seemed to contain the strength of the entire world. He lifted his hand and slowly pressed it down. Bang! It was endlessly terrifying, containing the great Tao of the heavens and earth. A wild strength instantly arrived, grasping the ancient's heart and the heart of the abyss. Above them, the black and white fire dragon phantoms revealed looks of shock and alarm. They roared and wildly struggled. This was another strength that surpassed their imaginations. It seemed to contain some sort of invincible and powerful will. No matter how the endless years washed over it, it still couldn't weaken it in the least. The black and white fire dragons could hear roars in their ears, reaching straight into the depths of their minds. Each roar contained an indomitable determination, a formidable strength that left one's heart trembling. Above the heart of the abyss, the black fire dragon roared, eternal and inextinguishable. You are their inheritor. Damn it, you are their inheritor. Its body seemed to have been placed in some strong acid. It was suffering intense corrosion, rapidly breaking apart and dissipating. After roaring, it began to howl in pain. Save me. Hurry and save me. Otherwise, if I die, you will also suffer a backlash. To the black fire dragon that occupied the heart of the abyss, the strength of the jade egg clearly had an additional killing power. This should be related to the inheritor of eternal undying that it had roared about. But as soon as this thought appeared in Qin Yu's mind, it vanished. Right now, he only had one thought in his mind, and that was to kill the black and white fire dragons and survive this chaotic situation. Save you? I don't think there's a need for me to do that. The strength of the eternal and inextinguishable inheritance has actually helped me a great deal. The white fire dragon opened its mouth. After roaring, it released a terrifying swallowing strength. When the black and white fire dragons were evenly matched, neither could do anything to the other. But now that the power of the abyss had been severely wounded, this balance was broken. The two were originally one. Now that one was weakened, it was no longer able to resist the plundering of the other, because, putting aside their own wills, the strength they possessed instinctively yearned to fuse with the other and become even stronger. With an unwilling roar, the black fire dragon collapsed. Its body turned into a black current that submerged into the white fire dragon's body. After swallowing the black fire dragon, changes began to occur all over its body. With loud, crackling sounds, its body began to expand at an astonishing speed. At the same time, black and white colors began to appear on the surface of its scales. They constantly swirled around, as if they were forming a samsara cycle, mysterious and mystical. Roar! The fire dragon reared its head back and roared. A different aura spread out from its body. The boundless suppressive strength began to violently shake. Because at this moment, after completing the fusion, it had completed its life transformation. It had transcended the shackles of the world and become a true immortal existence. Not only did its strength rise, but the rise in its life made it impossible for it to lock onto its target. No matter how formidable the strength of the world was, it was impossible for it to harm a life form that transcended the world. If it weren't for the jade egg itself possessing a transcendental attribute, then the suppressive strength it released would have been completely ineffective. Qin Yu, with your cultivation, you already possess such good fortune. If you are given enough time to truly grow, not even I dare to guess just how powerful you will become. The fire dragon slowly spoke, its massive body swimming through its blood vessels. But today you must perish. I will obtain all of your strength and the chance to reach the peak of the world. I guarantee you that if there is a day in the future when I can stabilize the ruler realm, I will surely reverse time and bring you back from the realm of death. I will grant you a new life. The fire dragon's body moved. Black and white flames were released from its scales, weaving together to form a vortex. Rumble, rumble. As the vortex spun, a powerful pulling force was released. This strength wrapped around Qin Yu, completely swallowing up everything he had, including his flesh and blood, his soul. Then a new life would be born in this vortex. It would bid farewell to the past, leaving no trace behind. Even if a ruler-level existence were to descend and reverse time to investigate, they still wouldn't be able to lock onto his tracks. At that time, he would be able to begin a brand new life. Whether it was the abyss or the world of living beings, they were destined to submit beneath his feet. Kacha! Kacha! Qin Yu could hear cracking sounds coming from all around him. Each sound meant that a terrifying crack had appeared. Each crack seemed to be on his body. Or It was more accurate to say that the pain they produced was directly affecting his soul. It made him feel as if he would be torn to shreds and vanish into thin air. As he thought, whether it was the Abyssal King or the great figure that built the myriad soul Tao in the past, neither of them could be easily killed. Even though countless years had passed and they had become incomparably weak, they still weren't existences that he could rely on his own strength to contend with. Little Blue Lamp. With a deep roar, madness shined his eyes. This was Qin Yu's final trump card, and also his most powerful method. The reason he was able to live to this day and climb up the great Tao to his current cultivation was all because of this little blue lamp. If he failed again, then perhaps he was doomed to die today. Bang! Above Qin Yu's head, space shattered. But this wasn't the end. Rather, it was the beginning of a massive collapse. An invisible and terrifying strength. It swept out in all directions like a tide, causing space to collapse inch by inch and forming a dark void that stretched as far as the eye could see. He was trapped in this dark void, imprisoned by an invisible strength. In the next moment, the phantom of a great sun arrived. In that moment, the radiant sunlight covered Qin Yu like fire. The light surged as if it were burning. But now, these flames didn't cause any damage to Qin Yu at all. But this didn't mean that they were nothing more than phantoms without any strength. On the contrary, the might of these flames was strong enough to instantly burn mountains and seas into nothingness, turning the world into a purgatory. However, all of the strength it released had already smashed into Qin Yu's chest. It turned into an endless hell of fire that imprisoned the fire dragon within. As space shattered and the dark void arrived, the fire dragon could already feel fear rising from the depths of its heart. With its current level of life and the strength it possessed, it could be said that it stood at the peak of all existences in the infinite heavens. If it could feel fear and even despair, then there was only one possibility: a ruler. This was the strength of a ruler. The fire dragon couldn't help but doubt its own understanding once more. What it wanted to kill was a little cultivator that hadn't even stepped into the original divinity realm. How could it possibly draw out the highest peak existence in the world? Could it be that some ruler had determined that Qin Yu would inherit their legacy and become a candidate to become the new ruler? If this was true, then there would inevitably be a mark left on his body that belonged to a ruler. But the fire dragon hadn't sensed anything strange before. With the situation having reached this step, thinking about these things was meaningless. The fire dragon never imagined that after it completed its fusion and its strength rose to its peak, it would face the desperate straits of death. Ruler, that was an existence that could reverse the river of time, an existence that possessed inconceivable might. With just a thought, it could cause the heavens to collapse and the earth to cave in. Even if it were the fire dragon, it still wouldn't have the strength to face a ruler. As the fire dragon was filled with despair, the endless hell of fire arrived. It felt an intense pain. Black and white scales that flowed endlessly broke apart in the flames, revealing the blurry flesh and blood underneath. Then, it was burned into an even more miserable state. But at this time, the despair in the fire dragon's eyes began to fade away. After the joy of surviving a calamity, it was replaced by a wild joy that was hard to suppress. It wasn't a ruler. The one who attacked wasn't a ruler. Otherwise, within the hell of fire, it would have been instantly burnt to nothing. It wouldn't have had the chance to carefully experience this pain. But this hell of fire did indeed possess some characteristics that belonged to the ruler level. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easily injured. Then, there was only one possibility: the mark of a ruler. In this world, besides a ruler, there was nothing that could withstand their terrifying might. Whether it was life or matter, the moment they touched the power of a ruler, they would be annihilated, turning into nothingness. Besides that, there is only one existence that could release a portion of the might of a ruler. That was the unsurpassed mark of a ruler. In the vast world, there were endless worlds. But there was a limit to the number of rulers. This was because the number of rulers that could entrust their lives to become rulers had been constant since ancient times. Thump, thump, the fire dragon's heart wildly beat. At this moment, it even forgot about the torment of purgatory its body was withstanding. Its eyes stubbornly stared at the sea of fire in front of it, as if it were looking at a transcendent great Tao that led straight to the peak of the world. Endless years ago, a time so long ago that not even the will of the fire dragon was born, there was a ruler that suddenly perished. His mark wasn't passed down, but shattered into countless fragments that scattered through the world. For billions and billions of years, countless lives searched for the fragments of the ruler's mark. They hoped that one day they would be able to reform the ruler's mark and fill in the empty seat of the ruler in the universe. But the river of time flowed for an incalculable amount of time. Trillions of geniuses appeared, like stars illuminating a corner of the heavens. But in the end, they all perished one after another, and no one was able to truly become a ruler. There were even rumors that said that the ruler that perished in the past had destroyed his own mark before he died, causing the ruler of the world to be eternally absent. The fire dragon didn't know whether or not this rumor was true. But there was one thing it was sure of, and that was that what appeared in front of it was a fragment of the ruler's mark. Moreover, this fragment seemed to have already approved of Chinyu. Thus, when he faced death, it had taken the initiative to descend. It had to obtain it. It had to obtain it. With the sovereign brand fragment in his hands and his current cultivation base, he would be second only to sovereigns. In fact, he could even dodge a sovereign's attack in advance. Furthermore, by relying on the connection between the sealing marks of the sovereign, it would be able to gather all of the other sealing marks together and eventually become something that could illuminate heaven and earth, something that would never be destroyed. Ruler, ruler, roar! Within the inferno prison, the fire dragon crazily roared. Crazed wasn't just a description. At this moment, it had truly gone mad. So what if he had to give up everything he had for the sake of the sovereign's brand? Even if he had to start from scratch, it was definitely worth it. Bang, bang. The fire dragon's massive body began to disintegrate bit by bit. This wasn't because of the inferno prison, but rather because it had chosen to destroy itself. Of course, this method of self-destruction was, strictly speaking, the same as a cultivator's self-destruction. From this, it could be imagined just what kind of astonishing energy impact would be produced when the fire dragon self-detonated. It was so powerful that even the Inferno prison, which possessed a portion of the sovereign realm's power, was unable to withstand it. It was absolutely impossible for the fire dragon to tear open the Inferno prison by self-detonating. Even if it only possessed a portion of the sovereign realm's might, it would still be a true peak, invincible existence. Unless another ruler attacked, it would be impossible to break through. But if it concentrated its self-detonation strength and opened a crack in the Inferno prison, there was still a chance. Now, what the fire dragon needed to do was open a path through the Inferno prison. Even if it could only last for a moment, it would be enough for the remnant souls in the head to rush out and swallow Qin Yu's soul. Chapter 1033. This was the situation that the little blue lamp was most worried about. With his strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the fire dragon. Of course, the premise of this was that he had to risk being discovered. Once they were discovered, whether it was him or Qin Yu, they were doomed to die. So, as Qin Yu's cultivation grew stronger and he came into contact with higher levels, he became more and more silent, trying to reduce his traces as much as possible. This was the reason. Of course, in today's situation where Qin Yu was facing a hopeless life or death situation, the fire dragon had no choice but to take the risk. But doing so wasn't foolproof. This was because the fire dragon's strength had already surpassed a certain boundary. Even if it fell into the burning flame hells, it still had the strength to desperately struggle. For instance, if it were to burn itself and erupt with a terrifying strength for a short period of time, it might be able to open an exit to the burning flame hells. In order to accomplish this, the fire dragon in its pure soul state had to pay a tremendous price. Its remnant soul strength was less than a tenth of its original strength. But comparatively speaking, it was still far more formidable than Qin Yu's soul, although it was impossible to determine victory or defeat in a battle of souls with absolute strength. Even if all factors were considered, Qin Yu didn't have much of a chance of victory against the fire dragon. This was because the little blue lamp had already predicted this situation before it attacked. Thus, it had said that if Qin Yu wanted to survive, he would have to rely on himself in the end. Now is the time to fulfill its prophecy. Qin Yu, the fire dragon, is burning its soul, and a remnant soul will break out. This is its final counterattack. If you can swallow up its remnant soul, you can cross today's calamity. The little blue lamp didn't say what the consequences of failure would be, but Qin Yu was well aware of it. As he thought, no matter how many cards he had in his hands, there was no way he could make up for the absolute disparity in strength. He still had to rely on himself to find a way out. Qin Yu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. In the next moment, within his soul space, his soul's main body opened its eyes, a sharp light surging within them. I hope that after this fire dragon breaks out of the burning flame hells, its remnant strength won't be too strong. Just as this thought appeared, the little blue lamp's deep and low voice resounded in his ears. It's coming. Bang! With a loud ringing sound, it was like he had been struck in the head. Qin Yu's field of vision darkened, and in the next moment, there were loud cracking sounds coming from above his head. He looked up and saw that the space above his soul space had already been heavily smashed apart. A fierce and ugly dragon had emerged. After being burnt by the flames, its scales had fallen off and it was dripping with blood. It glared at Qin Yu, its eyes filled with greed and cruelty. Roar! With a loud roar, two thick dragon claws shot out, grabbing onto the crack in the soul space and forcefully ripping it open. Then its entire body drilled in. With just a glance, Qin Yu could feel an indescribably terrifying pressure pressing down on him. It was like an entire mountain range was placed on his chest, making it hard for him to even breathe. Indeed, compared to its complete state, the fire dragon before them had been severely weakened, be it in terms of size or power. But it still surpassed Qin Yu's expectations. Compared to the fire dragon in front of him, his soul was like comparing an adult to a child. This severely lowered his evaluation of the fire dragon. What to do? Qin Yu's mind shook. He was stunned for a moment, even feeling a bit of fear and despair. But the fire dragon didn't stop its actions. Although its remnant soul had escaped from the hells of flame, it wasn't sure whether or not the ruler's mark in Qin Yu's hand had any other methods. If there was another method similar to the hells of flame, then with its current condition, it would be hard for it to escape death. Thus, it had to act quickly without any hesitation. As long as it swallowed Qin Yu's soul, the ruler's mark would be in its hands. Roar! With another roar, the fire dragon howled forwards, its eyes locked onto Qin Yu's soul, cold and tyrannical. Fear was unavoidable. If it was anyone else, they would tremble in fear when facing a fire dragon that was far stronger than them and had such a terrifying appearance. Despair, perhaps there was a moment, but that didn't mean Qin Yu had given up on resisting. On the contrary, his will to live had never wavered. The fire dragon was indeed powerful, but this was his soul space. In other words, this was his home ground. Set! With a loud shout, Qin Yu lifted a hand. The phantom of an ancient bronze mirror appeared in front of him and shot out a beam of light. This beam of light submerged into the fire dragon's body. This was the soul-setting divine light that Qin Yu had inadvertently obtained. To the soul, it had the ability to ignore defensive seals to a certain degree. No matter how powerful one was, as long as they were struck by the soul-setting divine light, they would fall into a brief daze. As for the fire dragon in front of him, it was no surprise. Although it had become an existence that transcended the world and its soul had undergone a qualitative leap, the soul-setting divine light was still effective. Even so, the soul-setting divine light was still effective. From this, it could be seen that the rank of this supernatural power was far, far higher than Yu had imagined. But right now, his cultivation was limited, and he couldn't display the true might of the soul setting divine light. Of course, at this time, Yu didn't have the mind to pay attention to these things. The slightly sluggish fire dragon only paused for a tenth of a breath of time before breaking free of the soul setting divine light seal. Although it was incomparably short, the fire dragon still felt a great sense of alarm rise in its heart. Yu was truly worthy of being someone that obtained the approval of the ruler's mark. Although his cultivation was weak, he actually had countless astonishing methods. For instance, this soul-setting divine light didn't seem too formidable, but it seemed to carry with it some great will of the heavens and earth that was actually able to forcefully seal it away. If this method fell into the hands of a formidable existence on the same level as it, even if it was only for a moment, it would still be able to reverse the situation. At the very least, it would have been severely wounded by now. In such a situation, this fire dragon was still able to counterattack. This junior Yu absolutely couldn't be underestimated. A decisive light flashed in the fire dragon's eyes. It took a deep breath, and then its body exploded, turning into a mass of black and white fog that howled towards Yu's soul. This was a method similar to the disintegration of the divine soul. It could release the strength of the soul to the greatest degree. Of course, this method wasn't without limits. Once it was used, it had to swallow other souls in order to completely reform itself. Otherwise, it would gradually dissipate until it was completely annihilated. To the fire dragon, if it couldn't swallow Yu's soul, then it would be erased by the ruler's mark. Since that was the case, it didn't fear risking its life. Moreover, with Yu's cultivation, no matter how many cards he had, his weak cultivation was an irreparable shortcoming. With such a weak soul, as long as he approached it, he would be able to swallow it up in 2 or 3 bites. The degree of danger wasn't as high as he imagined. Yu's soul space was his home field. Thus, even when facing the formidable remnant soul of the fire dragon, he still had a chance to attack ahead of time. But now, it seemed he would only have one such chance. He didn't have much time. After the fire dragon disintegrated, the black and white fog it formed arrived. It split open from the middle and swallowed Yu's soul like a giant mouth. Of course, this didn't mean that Yu's soul was eaten up like this. On the contrary, the true swallowing process had just begun. To Yu, this wasn't a comfortable feeling. What he felt right now could be described as if he had been thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Every inch of his soul felt like it was being fried. This was only a description. In truth, replacing the pot of boiling oil with strong acid was more appropriate. This was because Yu's soul was being corroded and plundered from the outside. And what plundered him was the black and white fog that wrapped around him. The soul was the foundation of a cultivator. It was born from the heavens and earth, and was the most mysterious and mystical of all. Perhaps besides those at the supreme ruler realm, no one dared to say that they could completely grasp the mysteries of the circulation of the soul. But there was one point that all cultivators knew. The soul was extremely sensitive. If any pain was placed on the soul, it would be infinitely magnified, becoming incomparably terrifying and shocking. So, it was more accurate to say that this was the most painful moment Yu had ever faced in his life. The degree of pain was enough to collapse anyone's will in a single breath of time and cause their mind to collapse. Once this happened, the soul would lose all resistance, and there wouldn't be any accidents during the body seizing process. Even if Yu's mind was powerful enough and he had experienced many tribulations, his ability to withstand pain had greatly increased. But now he was only able to inspect it for a very short period of time, perhaps not even 10 breaths of time. Because of self-preservation, his consciousness fell into darkness. Even so, his powerful instinct to survive still urged his soul to swallow the fire dragon. With a great tearing motion, masses of black and white fog were torn off and swallowed into his stomach. Soul seizing was an incomparably dangerous process to begin with. This was because no matter how powerful a soul was, unless it reached the legendary realm of condensing the void into reality, it would always be extremely soft. Even if the fire dragon's remnant soul was far more formidable than Qin Yu's soul, it would still be ruthlessly torn apart by Qin Yu during the body seizing process. Of course, in comparison, Qin Yu's swallowing speed was far inferior to the fire dragon's. So, in the end, his soul would completely dissipate and become a part of the fire dragon's soul. But this was based on the premise that everything proceeded normally without any accidents. Accidents were bound to occur. Otherwise, if Qin Yu died here, there wouldn't be the great waves that would illuminate the highest heavens. Just as the fire dragon felt that the body seizing process was nearing its end, and as long as it put in a little more effort, it would be able to swallow Qin Yu's soul. Only then did it relax. It seemed that the power of the ruler's mark also had its limits. It couldn't attack it again and again. Once the body seizing was completed, everything would be settled. However, the toughness of Qin Yu's soul surpassed its expectations. During the entire body seizing process, he instinctively devoured the fire dragon in order to supplement his lost soul strength. If it weren't for this, the entire swallowing process would have already been completed. But this was also good, because he had swallowed a massive amount of the fire dragon's soul. Qin Yu's soul was already filled with the fire dragon's aura. This meant that after the fire dragon swallowed Qin Yu's soul, it would be less troublesome and the fusion would be smoother. Now was the time to end this. The fire dragon's thoughts stirred. The black and white fog that wrapped around Qin Yu's soul began to surge faster. But now, Qin Yu's soul was much more transparent than before. It was like a shadow that faced the suddenly rising, plundering strength. Because of the pain, it twitched as if it would collapse in the next moment. But at this time, the fire dragon suddenly heard a yawn, as if someone had just woken up from a deep slumber. A trace of horror rose from the depths of its heart. It didn't know where this yawn came from, but it could feel despair. Within the black and white fog, a fierce dragon had appeared. It opened its jaws and bit down at Qin Yu's soul. It wanted to eat Qin Yu's soul right now. Although this sort of crude method was likely to cause damage to the soul and cause it to lose the strength of its inheritance, it couldn't care less. Its intuition told it that if it didn't attack now, it would never have another chance. Chapter 1034. Little thing, you woke me up and you still dare to open your mouth? You got some guts. A slightly lazy voice rang out. There was a slight smell of someone who had just woken up. It fell into the ears softly, and the image of a girl from the Jiangnan River appeared in his mind. Her cheeks were slightly red in the afternoon, and her beautiful hair was messy. But now, as this voice fell into the fire dragon's ears, it didn't feel warm at all. Instead, it was filled with endless fear and cold. Puff! It couldn't be seen who attacked, nor could it be seen where the sword light came from. But the fog that wrapped around Qin Yu was instantly cut in half. Normally, fog was something intangible and intangible. Even if it was cut in half, it should still be able to fuse back together in the next moment. However, the strange thing was that the half of the mist that had been sliced off by the sword seemed to have been burned by a raging flame. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. The dragon head that wanted to bite down on Qin Yu's soul emitted a mournful howl before it shattered. The fog was the fire dragon. Now that it was cut in half, it was the same as its entire body being cut in half. Before this, it was mentioned that the soul had to withstand pain. Thus, it wasn't hard to imagine just how terrifying the pain the fire dragon was experiencing right now was. Within Qin Yu's soul space, a figure covered her mouth and yawned. She lowered her head and looked at Qin Yu. After blinking her eyes, she wrinkled her nose. I really regret taking you in as a disciple. How come there are so many things happening every day and you're still able to disturb me? I've only slept for a short period of time. If it weren't for humph, I really want to watch you get eaten up by someone so that you don't disturb me all the time. She stood there, her mouth muttering to herself. But The pained and terrified fire dragon clearly didn't sense her existence. As if, as long as she didn't want to, even if she stood in front of him, she was nothing but air. Suddenly, space rippled in front of him, and the little blue lamp appeared. It turned into a figure that bowed. "Greetings, ruler." The woman glanced at him. "You've developed your own spiritual wisdom? It seems that this piece of yours isn't small, or have you swallowed other fragments already?" The little blue lamp was silent for a moment. "I was just lucky. I haven't encountered any other fragments yet." "Rise. From a certain perspective, you are far more noble than I am. Moreover, I am no longer the ruler." The woman waved her hand, her tone casual. The little blue lamp shook its head. "No, you're the true ruler." He looked at Qin Yu's soul, his eyes filled with emotion. "I already sensed that he had a great destiny and that he would have great achievements in the future. But I never imagined that he would have the qualifications to be accepted as your disciple. If so, then I can rest assured." The woman sneered. "Don't try to shirk your responsibility. I was able to do it because the commotion was too big. Otherwise, I wouldn't have woken up. Moreover, you probably know that in my current state, I can't descend into the world frequently. So, in the future, you should keep an eye on him, or tell this kid to be more cautious. Don't always stir up trouble. If one day he plays himself to death, I don't really care. After all, there are many disciples in a big family, and you will be in trouble." The little blue lamp cupped his hands together. "You are right. I will tell him. Stop. Don't try to test me. Although I've accepted him as my disciple, I won't let him know before he passes the test. You should understand the rules, so it's best if you don't speak too much, otherwise you will stir up trouble. Humph humph, you shouldn't want to know why I'm in this state, right?" The little blue lamp's heart chilled. He nodded, no longer speaking. "Since you're taking care of me, I won't stay any longer. After all, if my existence is discovered, there'll be great trouble." As he spoke, space fluctuated and he vanished from sight. The woman was stunned for a moment. She rubbed her temples and said, "You ran quite fast." As she spoke, she lifted her hand and slashed again. Shwa! Sword light flashed. The black and white fog that wrapped around Qin Yu was cut in half once more. "Ah!" In the fog, the fire dragon's pained roar echoed out. Who is it?" It couldn't sense any aura at all. This sword light had appeared out of thin air, and its strength was terrifying to the extreme, able to directly wound its source. After 2 consecutive sword strikes, the fire dragon's strength was greatly reduced. It didn't even have a third of its original strength. The woman simply ignored the fire dragon's roar. She looked at Qin Yu's soul in the fog. "I've already used 2 sword strikes. If you still can't survive, then that is your fate. If you die, you can only blame yourself for being useless." A moment later, a translucent dragon head appeared, biting towards Qin Yu's soul. But just as it moved, it was cut apart by the sword light. Puff! Another half of the fog was directly annihilated. The woman curled her lips, revealing a bit of contempt. "Useless, really useless. You can't even deal with such a weak soul. You might as well find a piece of tofu and smash yourself to death so you don't disgrace yourself in the future." She had completely forgotten that not too long ago, she had said that Qin Yu's life and death depended on himself and that she wouldn't help him again. Indeed, a woman's words couldn't be trusted. The more beautiful they were, the more unreliable they were. If the fire dragon knew all of this, it would definitely vomit blood in grief and indignation. It reared its head back and roared, "You have no bottom line at all." But in truth, she didn't seem to have any bottom line at all. Because after this sword strike, the woman slashed out 3 more times. The massive mass of fog only had a thin layer left over, barely wrapping around Qin Yu. A transparent fire dragon phantom howled in the fog, its eyes filled with despair and unwillingness. But it couldn't change the situation it was facing. Since time immemorial, no matter when or where, competing with one's background was an unavoidable matter. Qin Yu originally didn't have much of background, but he didn't know that after becoming the disciple of someone else, he had obtained a golden thigh and the purity of that golden thigh was 9,999%. Although her words were filled with disdain, the truth was that she was very satisfied with this disciple of hers. In particular, when she discovered that Qin Yu had obtained a portion of the ruler's mark's approval, her satisfaction rose even higher. Although the ruler's mark was something that she couldn't do without, it was still the key to the great Tao. If she couldn't even obtain the key, then what use was it even if she was talented? Sometimes, something like luck was incomparably important. In this woman's opinion, this disciple with such a weak cultivation had far too good of a luck. If it weren't for this, why would she attack again and again? Because some of what she said before was true. For instance, in her current state, it would be best if she didn't descend. And even if she did, the number of times she attacked should be strictly limited. In order to slash out 6 times in a short period of time, even she would have to pay a considerable price, of course. If it were just to kill the fire dragon, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. If any one of those sword strikes erupted, it would be more than enough to leave the fire dragon beyond redemption. The reason she kept slashing out again and again was because she wanted to help Qin Yu preserve as much of the fire dragon's strength as possible. Only like this could he obtain the greatest benefits after swallowing it. Although she didn't clearly state her stance, the fire dragon soon realized what Qin Yu's female teacher was thinking. It was filled with anger, fear, despair, and even a bit of ruthlessness. Although it still hadn't been able to sense who the person who attacked was, it wasn't difficult to guess the identity of the person who could easily accomplish such a feat. Ruler. Only an unsurpassed existence could play with it in the palm of its hand. But even if a ruler could kill it, they couldn't treat it as food on a plate and feed it into Qin Yu's stomach. It couldn't flee, but it could choose to end its own life. Moreover, it wasn't certain that the fire dragon would die. It had to be known that half of its soul source came from the Abyssal King. As for the Abyssal King, once they obtained the recognition of the Abyssal Will, it was nearly impossible to kill them. Even if their souls were destroyed, there was still a chance that they could resurrect from the abyssal world after a long period of time. Although they might not succeed, there was at least a slim chance. As the fire dragon swam through the fog, a decisive light flashed in its eyes. In that moment, a terrifying aura erupted from its body. The woman suddenly clapped her hands, joy in her eyes. "I've caught you!" Bang! An invisible strength instantly arrived, suppressing all of the fog. The fire dragon phantom that swam through the fog froze in place. Now, the scales on its body began to crack apart, revealing the body beneath. The surface was covered with fine lines. On the verge of shattering, on the brink of life and death, this was the fire dragon's current state. Its eyes widened as if it could sense something incomparably terrifying. It crazily struggled to escape. But what a pity, facing the suppression of this boundless strength, everything it did was futile. Little thing, you can be too clever for your own good. This is exactly what you're doing right now. If you hadn't blown yourself up and exposed your life mark, then my disciple would have had to expend a bit more effort to eat you. Now, since you are useless, you should obediently dissipate. With a snap of her fingers, the light in the fire dragon's eyes rapidly vanished. In the blink of an eye, all that was left over was an empty void. Rumble, rumble. The abyssal city violently tumbled about. It was like a terrifying creature that had been buried deep within was about to awaken from its slumber. The originally withered and dissipated abyssal demon energy gushed out once more. In the blink of an eye, it filled every inch of space within the world. The woman looked up at the pitch-black skies, a dignified expression on her face. But the corners of her lips curved up in a faint excitement. As expected, you fellow are still so brainless. This is the world of living beings, not a place where you can act like a tyrant. You actually dared to directly descend here. It seems that after so many years of not fighting, you've already forgotten my methods originally. If I didn't have even 10% confidence in this matter, I would at most have tried. But now that you've arrived, as long as I can sever your will, perhaps I might have a better chance. She lifted a hand and grasped forwards. Although there was clearly nothing there, it was like she was grasping something cold and hard. In the air, the temperature crazily fell. Strong winds howled, as if they were mournful wails. It was as if the entire world could sense the terrifying strength that was about to appear. This strength was so dreadful that it could cause tremendous damage to the world itself. She lifted her hand and slashed forwards. The woman's movements weren't fast, but one could clearly see the movement of her wrist. But the moment her hand fell, a startling sword light shot up into the skies. Like a heaven-defying flood, it howled into the horizon. With a single sword strike, the pitch-black skies were split in half. Within the tumbling waves of endless abyssal demon energy, it scattered and vanished. Roar! An angry roar echoed out from within the dissipating abyssal demon energy. It carried with it a thick sense of unwillingness and resentment. Intense fluctuations of will swept through the entire city, shaking all the surviving cultivators until they fainted. The woman shot up into the skies. After several breaths of time, she drew back. She was holding a dark mass of light in her palm. It was like a liquid substance, but also like a living creature that struggled to escape. However, he was firmly imprisoned by those fair and slender fingers, and was unable to escape at all. Looking down at this object, a strange light shined in the woman's eyes. She had actually succeeded. In front of her, the fire dragon with empty eyes burst apart like bubbles. Even though it was only an extremely small portion of the abyssal source, it was still incomparably precious, even to her. Hesitation flashed in the woman's eyes. She hesitated for a moment and then shook her head. There are countless things in the world, and each one is born for a reason. This thing was born because of Chinyu, so if I were to occupy it then, that would be boring. That's fine. Since it was born because of you, I'll give it to you. But I can't let you obtain such a good thing for free. You have to help me a little. Looking down at the unconscious Chinyu, the woman's eyes flashed with excitement and anticipation. Chapter 1035. The skies were dark and the earth was dyed red with blood. Strong black winds howled without end, sweeping up large amounts of sand between the thorns. With a crashing sound, it was like a rain of stones, making one feel anxious. A woman sat at the entrance of a cave, calmly looking at the scene in front of her. Her eyes were bright, and there seemed to be some interest in them. After an unknown period of time, there was some movement from deep within the cave. A moment later, a young man walked out from the darkness. He looked at the woman's back and frowned. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Who are you? Where's this place?" The young man who spoke was Chinyu. The woman turned around, revealing an ordinary face. There were several small freckles on both sides of her nose. She was the most ordinary 16 to 17-year-old girl and couldn't be considered beautiful. But she gave Chinyu a completely different feeling. He instinctively felt a sense of closeness towards her from the depths of his heart. "This is the abyss. I am your savior." Her reply was simple and effective. Chinyu's complexion changed. Abyss. He never imagined that after he fainted and woke up, he would be here. Looking outside the cave, he could see that the black winds were indeed stirring up faint abyssal demonic energy. In the legends, the world of the abyss was filled with demonic energy and was the nemesis of all flesh and blood beings. Once one entered, they would instantly be corroded into a puddle of blood. But now, he didn't feel any discomfort when he breathed in. In fact, as tiny traces of abyssal demonic energy were sucked into his body, he even felt refreshed and comfortable. What was going on here? The woman lightly said, "The reason is simple. It is because your current state is that of an abyssal life form." Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his shaking heart. He closed his eyes and sensed his current situation. After a long time, he opened his eyes, a complex color on his face. This was because what the woman in front of him said was correct. He had indeed transformed into an abyssal life form. In his chest, the other two hearts had temporarily fallen into a dormant state. Only the black heart of the abyss was vigorously beating, pushing the power of the abyss to flow through his limbs and bones. And what was even more astonishing was that Qin Yu discovered that all of his strength was in a dormant state, like his two hearts were sealed away. The abyss and the world of the living operate on different laws. Since you have entered here, you cannot use the strength of the other world. Of course, correspondingly, you will also obtain a blessing from the laws of the abyss, the woman said with a smile. Qin Yu said in a low voice, "Just who are you, and why did I enter the abyss?" The woman's smile remained unchanged. "You do indeed deserve a name. From now on, you can call me Teacher Liao. As for why you entered the abyss, that is because you fused with a portion of the abyss's origin source, so it is only natural that you would be brought here." The spring and autumn annals brushed past some of her contributions to the book. She couldn't possibly say, "Because I've been wanting to enter the abyss for a long time, so I let you bring me in." Harmony, harmony. Without giving Qin Yu any more time to think, Liao Shi continued, "I saved your life, and I'm sure you don't doubt that. So, it's time for you to repay me." Qin Yu looked at her. This woman didn't have the least bit of aura around her, as if she were the most ordinary of women. Even if she had lost all of her strength, she could still be crushed to death with just her mortal body alone. But for some unknown reason, when he faced her, he felt an instinctive dread. There was no reason for it, but it truly existed in his heart. Of course, the most important point was that it was absolutely impossible for an ordinary woman to save him, much less appear in the abyss. Perhaps the ordinary appearance he saw in front of him was because his strength wasn't enough to see through this woman's concealment. That's right, Qin Yu didn't doubt this woman at all when she said that she was his savior. If it weren't for this, then with the state he was in before he fainted, he would have been swallowed up by the fire dragon, and his soul would have perished. "What do you want?" Liao Shi turned her head and continued to look at the flying sand and stones outside. "I want to see more of this world." "Qin Yu, what sort of request was this?" Just at this moment, a series of hurried knocking sounds came from outside the cave. A black shadow was charging towards the cave against the rain of stones that filled the sky. Upon closer inspection, one could see that this was an abyssal creature shaped like a blue wolf. Its entire body was covered in dense scales, and its eyes were stubbornly staring at Liao Shi. Its mouth was wide open, revealing fangs that constantly dripped with stinking saliva. "Protect me," Liao Shi lightly said. As Qin Yu was startled, the abyssal scaled wolf outside the cave had already leapt up, tearing at her. This woman could save him in the myriad soul Dao and even bring the two of them into the abyss. So why would she need his protection? As his thoughts raced, Qin Yu had already attacked. He didn't think too much about it. His body instinctively responded. Within his chest, the pitch-black heart of the abyss fiercely beat. A tyrannical strength gushed out from his limbs and bones. As the ground cracked apart, Qin Yu was like a shadow as he landed at the cave entrance. He stood in front of the scaled wolf and punched out. The abyssal scaled wolf's sharp claws were pitch black and shined with a metallic luster. They were the hardest part of its body. Even its fangs were 2 levels lower than them. As it saw Qin Yu's fist coming at it, awe appeared in its eyes. But soon, this awe was drowned out by the greed and desire in its heart. Roar! With a deep roar, the abyssal scaled wolf's speed increased. Bang! There was a loud explosion accompanied by a pained roar. The abyssal scaled wolf's bull-like body was sent flying backwards. Its incomparably hard claws were broken off, and its entire front leg was broken into several pieces. It tumbled to the ground, rolling around in pain. Fresh blood dripped down from its face. It turned out to be a broken claw that had actually pierced into its eye socket. It was so deep that it pierced through one of its eyeballs. Qin Yu looked down at the white mark on his fist, his eyes shaking. Although the ancient, undying body was powerful, it absolutely couldn't reach such a degree. The scaled wolf he fought just now might not have been too strong, but its claws were incredibly sharp. But even so, it hadn't been able to cause any damage to Qin Yu's fist. Was this the transformation of its body caused by the abyssal strength? As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, the severely wounded abyssal-scaled wolf finally crawled up from the ground. Its blinded eye was still dripping blood. Because its front leg had been broken into several pieces, it was curled up in the air, constantly swaying in the wind. After suffering such heavy wounds, when it faced Qin Yu, its remaining eye revealed a look of fear. But it didn't run away. Instead, deep and low roars came from deep within its throat, one that gradually became a bit more crazed and cruel. Qin Yu frowned. He glanced at the quiet Liao Shi. After several breaths of time, with the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground, the abyssal-scaled wolf's giant body's aura completely dissipated, turning into a corpse. Qin Yu's complexion changed. This was because he discovered that as the abyssal-scaled wolf died, a blood that had appeared in his soul space, shining with a dim blood-red light. Liao Shi said, "This is the mark of the abyssal life form you killed. The stronger you are, the brighter the blood that will be. It doesn't have much use now, but once you return to the world of the living, you will discover that these blood dots can give you great benefits." She smiled. This can also be considered the path of balance. Abyssal life forms eat flesh and blood, not only because they taste good, but also because flesh and blood are great supplements to them. And when flesh and blood beings kill abyssal life forms, they will naturally have harvests. As for the specifics, you will naturally find out in the future, so I won't say anything more. Qin Yu turned and looked at her. "This abyssal-scaled wolf skull was you?" Liao Shi nodded. "That's right. In my current state, there is a small problem. My body will release a scent that is very tempting to abyssal life forms. In short, it will make them want to eat me up into their stomachs. What you need to do is protect me in the abyss and live as long as possible. Moreover, there is something else I must remind you of. The longer you stay here, the stronger the scent on my body will become. So, you had best think of a way. Otherwise, even if you hide here without moving, you will still attract more and more abyssal life forms." Qin Yu frowned. If this was the case, then everything made sense. No wonder that the abyssal-scaled wolf hadn't left after being severely wounded by him, but had instead desperately continued to attack. It seemed that the tempting scent that Liao Shi spoke of wasn't as simple as just tempting. He feared that it would drive abyssal life forms crazy. If this was the case, wanting to protect her wouldn't be simple at all. If he wasn't careful, he would fall into danger. After all, this was an incomparably terrifying abyss. Liao Shi's lips curved up in a smile. "I am your savior. Are you not even willing to agree to such a simple request?" Qin Yu remained expressionless. "Since you saved my life, I will naturally repay you with all my strength. But if I really reach a critical moment of life or death, please don't blame me for running away." He was willing to repay this kindness, but he never thought that he would give up his life because of it. This had nothing to do with selfishness. Rather, in his opinion, this mysterious Liao Shi might not die so easily. Perhaps what he needed to do next was to protect his own life. Liao Shi smiled. "You are quite magnanimous, but I don't blame you. If you really reach a critical moment of life or death, you can run away. However, there is something I must remind you of. It is best if you help me live a little longer, because the longer I stay in the abyss, the more help I can give you, for instance, how to unravel the myriad soul Tao." Qin Yu's eyes exploded with a sharp light. "Are you serious?" Liao Shi lightly said. "I never lie." "Good." Qin Yu took a deep breath. "I will do my best to protect you." Liao Shi blinked, a bit surprised. "Aren't you afraid that I am lying to you?" Qin Yu said, "I believe in my own intuition." "A man's sixth sense?" Liao Shi whispered. He couldn't help but curl his lips. He actually dared to believe something like this? Didn't he know that most intuition was a lie? Qin Yu strode out of the cave and arrived beside the abyssal, scaled wolf's corpse. He allowed the sand and stones to fall on him, making loud, crackling sounds. Thinking for a moment, he grabbed the scaled wolf's corpse and walked back into the cave. "You said that you wanted me to protect you and help you survive as long as possible in the abyss?" Liao Shi looked at Qin Yu and then at the wolf corpse in his hands. That's right. But what do you want to do? Qin Yu tore off the wolf's head. The corpse was still warm, and a massive amount of black blood splashed out. It's simple. Since your scent will attract the abyssal creatures to go crazy, I will cover it up. Liao Shi's eyes widened. But before she could object, Qin Yu grabbed her wrist. This is the method I came up with. If you don't agree, then I won't go back on my word. A moment later, the wolf corpse was tossed to the ground. Liao Shi's body was covered in black wolf blood that emitted a pungent stench. Liao Shi clenched her teeth. Can't you think of some other method? Qin Yu lightly said, there might be other methods, but this is the most direct and also the most effective. He squatted down and skinned the scaled wolf. Then he took out the softest part of its neck and turned it into a coarse wolf skin mask. Wear it. In the future, without my permission, you cannot take it off. Although Liao Shi's appearance was ordinary, it had an invisible charm to it. Qin Yu didn't want to provoke unnecessary trouble. Her robes were soaked in wolf blood, and her entire body was soaked in the stench. Liao Shi looked at the coarse wolfskin mask in Qin Yu's hands and opened her mouth. Finally, she took it, as if she had already given up on resisting. However, her teeth were clenched even tighter. She roared out in her heart, Brat Qin Yu, just you wait. The debt between us is becoming increasingly thick. Chapter 1036. After putting on the wolf blood clothes and the wolfskin mask, Qin Yu didn't stop. He dismembered the abyssal, scaled wolf into pieces and scattered them around the cave. By doing this, he should be able to cover up Liao Shi's scent, right? Qin Yu didn't know the answer. He could only leave it to time to find out. Umph! Don't you know that abyssal life forms like to devour each other to strengthen themselves? The scent of this abyssal scaled wolf's flesh and blood will soon attract the surrounding hunters. At that time, you will be in even more trouble. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. If they want to come, then let them. I welcome them. Even though his cultivation had been sealed, after entering the abyss, he had still managed to obtain an extremely powerful strength. For instance, this abyssal scaled wolf. Although he didn't know what level of strength it was in the abyss, when Qin Yu killed it, it was like killing a chicken. Although it was a bit excessive to say that Qin Yu killed it like a chicken, the truth was that it wasn't too difficult. If it weren't for him wanting to test his current strength, there wouldn't have been any white marks on his fists. Of course, the faint white marks left behind by the wolf claws had long since disappeared. Liao Shi coldly sneered and turned to sit down. As he looked at Qin Yu's back, a bright light flashed in his eyes. Putting aside his decisiveness and wisdom, this boy's luck was truly good. After she entered the abyss, she had sealed away all of her strength. If even the tiniest bit leaked out, the will of the abyss would sense it. Thus, she really didn't have the slightest ability to protect herself. Only when she was done playing around and wanted to leave could she truly release the aura that belonged to her. If Qin Yu had woken up a bit later, or if the abyssal scaled wolf had arrived a bit earlier, she might have been forced to leave. This seemed like a simple matter, but the truth was that it had an incomparably profound effect. This meant that she could continue staying in the abyss and carefully observe the world. Reality proved that Liao Shi was right. The scent of the abyssal, scaled wolf's flesh and blood had indeed attracted other hunters. Unfortunately, they weren't too strong. After they found the abyssal scaled wolf, they didn't take away the flesh and blood of the abyssal scaled wolf. Instead, they left their own corpses behind. Thus, as time passed, the cave was filled with the broken limbs of abyssal life forms. Black blood nearly soaked the ground, emitting a thick stench that could make one faint with just a single breath. Even better news was that besides the first few abyssal life forms that came, no one else was able to detect Liao Shi's scent. It seemed that Qin Yu's plan was useful. By borrowing the stench of the abyssal life forms from the abyssal life forms, he could sense. Liao Shi had said that all she wanted was to stay in the abyss for a period of time. There was no special requirement regarding the location or the environment. This meant that this cave was a good choice. However, if what Liaosher said was true, then as time passed, the smell on her body would become more and more intense. At that time, the smell of the abyssal creature's flesh and blood would most likely be unable to be concealed. Perhaps he needed the flesh and blood of even stronger abyssal life forms to continue concealing himself. Abyssal life form, and you closed his eyes and closed. And, he took, and he, perhaps, he to the, Qin. You closed his eyes. God, he too, Ming he, 4T. For instance, the abyssal life forms that were attracted by the stench of flesh and blood. As long as he saw them, he would know their species and approximate strength. Of course, the abilities of the abyssal life forms weren't limited to just this. Qin Yu slowly perceived a cultivation method from them. The content was similar to what Liaosher had said before. The abyssal life forms swallowed each other to constantly strengthen themselves. This cultivation method was born from the abyssal life forms. After perceiving it, it was branded into Qin Yu's soul. It didn't have a name. Then, let's call it blood refining. Shua. Qin Yu opened his eyes. After leaving the cave, he arrived beside the corpse of an abyssal life form. This corpse was shaped like a lion. It was 20 feet long, and besides scales covering its body, there was also a spiral horn on its head. Even though it had died, this horn still had traces of black lightning lingering around it, constantly emitting crackling sounds. The Dark Thunder Demon Lion could be considered to stand at the top of the food chain amongst the abyssal beasts. As for natural existences that could force it to be stronger, they were extremely rare. Using it as an experiment was quite suitable. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu squatted down. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger at the Dark Thunder Demon Lion. His thoughts stirred, and he immediately opened the blood-refining art. Faint traces of blood-red light appeared on the Dark Thunder Demon Lion's body, gathering towards him like a living creature. They flowed along his finger and constantly fused into Qin Yu's body. This feeling? Qin Yu's face revealed an intoxicated expression. As blood energy flowed into his body, he could clearly feel the heart of the abyss beating even more powerfully. Heat tumbled through his limbs and bones, making him feel comfortable to the extreme. When the last wisp of blood energy was completely plundered away, the Dark Thunder Demon Lion's body had withered like a piece of wood that had been dried up for countless years. With a light cracking sound, it shattered into powder. Qin Yu opened his eyes. There was a trace of blood red in the depths of his eyes. He licked the corners of his lips, feeling an impatient impulse. His heart felt like it was crawling with ants. He wished he could immediately open the blood-refining art and begin plundering blood energy once more. Something was wrong. Qin Yu took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the impulse in his heart. The blood energy within his body tumbled for a long time before it slowly calmed down. Liaosher's voice sounded out. You're smart. Although this plundering art can strengthen one's body, there's an enormous downside to it. If you cannot restrain its temptation and sink into it, you will quickly plunder too much and your bloodline will become impure. Finally, your bloodline will go berserk and you will become a monster that is neither human nor ghost. You might even lose your mind and become a walking corpse that only knows how to slaughter. Qin Yu's heart chilled. Liaosher had no reason to lie to him. Indeed, there was something wrong with that feeling just now. Luckily, he had been cautious enough and hadn't been swallowed by the desire to plunder. I call this art blood refining. It is to seize the bloodline of an outside world to strengthen oneself. But now, it seems that its flaws are far too great. That desire to devour just now was something that even he had nearly been unable to suppress. Those who were weaker might have already fallen into it. Blood refining. Liaosher repeated this name several times. Then, she nodded. This name is quite appropriate. The foundation of an abyssal creature is their own bloodline. Through cultivation or plundering, They can constantly strengthen themselves and absorb more abyssal demonic energy until the will of the abyss descends upon them. She glanced at Chinyu. There are countless arts in the world, and no matter how perfect they seem, there will always be flaws. This is because in this world, there is no such thing as true perfection. The bloodline law that you perceive from the source of the abyss may affect your mind, but as long as your will is strong enough and your mind isn't blinded by bloodthirst, as well as you control the frequency at which you use it, it can be considered a heaven-defying cultivation art. Of course, I must remind you that this cultivation art can only be used in the abyss because it is a method approved by the will of the abyss. It cannot be used outside. Moreover, as your cultivation deepens, the more strength you obtain from the blood-refining art, the more powerful the influence it will have on your mind will become. Chinyu had a dignified expression. There is nothing in this world that is perfect. As he thought to himself, a light flashed in his eyes, as if he had gained something. After several breaths of time, he composed himself. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Thank you for the reminder, Miss Liaoshe." Liaoshe closed her eyes. "It's nothing. I just hope that you can help me stay in the abyss for a little longer." Seeing that she wasn't willing to speak further, Chinyu turned and returned to the entrance of the cave. He sat down cross-legged and began to sense the changes occurring within his body. The bloodline of the Dark Thunder Demon Lion that had been plundered by the blood-refining art was now within the heart of the abyss. As Chinyu focused his consciousness on it, he could even see a shrunken, blood-red Dark Thunder Demon Lion struggling and roaring within the heart of the abyss. What he needed to do next was to thoroughly refine its bloodline. After stripping away all the impurities, it would return to his body. This process wouldn't be too fast, and it would also require a massive amount of energy. But only like this would he be able to obtain the purest bloodline strength that wouldn't harm him. As Chinyu closed his eyes and urged the heart of the abyss to beat, constantly tempering the Dark Thunder Demon Lion's bloodline as it contracted and expanded, Liaoshe suddenly opened her eyes. When she looked at him, there was a different light in her eyes. After fusing with the abyssal source, Chinyu was able to perceive the inheritance arts of the abyssal royal family from the will of the abyss. She already knew this, but Liaoshe never imagined that Chinyu would obtain a blood-refining art. It had to be known that although this plundering bloodline-strengthening art had major drawbacks, the speed at which one's strength increased was terrifying. With the special characteristics of abyssal life forms, one wouldn't need to cultivate after obtaining it. As long as one lived long enough, they could eat and become an abyssal king. With Liaoshe's understanding of the abyss, Chinyu's blood-refining art was an incomparably precious treasure even amongst the abyssal royal family. Perhaps only the most powerful royal bloodlines would have fragmented inheritances. This boy's luck was truly invincible. Moreover, this was only the first inheritance art he had awakened. By fusing with the abyssal source, he would be able to awaken at least 2 different talents. I really want to know what other abilities you will obtain during the second awakening. She looked deeply at Chinyu as she whispered. Luck was the most illusory of all things. No one could explain it clearly, but it truly existed. There were trillions and trillions of cultivators in the world. Why was it that some people could leap into the skies and step into the highest heavens, while others perished early and turned to dust? There was no other reason, only luck. This wasn't a fallacy. Rather, it was a conclusion drawn by those who had lived long enough and seen far too many people with amazing talent and hard work. Of course, something like luck was only left to those who worked hard. If one just sat around and waited for death, then they could only pray for some dogshit luck. Entering the abyss was originally a whim of Liaoshe's. She thought that she would soon be expelled, but she never imagined that Chinyu would think of such a shameless method. Staying here a bit longer was naturally good for her. Moreover, Liaoshe also wanted to know what changes would happen to Chinyu. I hope I can stay here for a few more days, but if I rely on this method, I fear I won't be able to last too long. At this time, Liaoshe suddenly frowned. She looked up into the distance. Strong winds howled and sand and stones flew everywhere. The world was vast and boundless without any abnormalities, but she seemed to sense something. A large black iron carriage wrapped in some kind of thick bee skin was moving forward in the fierce wind. The carriage was pulled by two giant horned demonic cows. They breathed out white gas from their noses and mouths, and no matter how many flying stones hit their bodies, it was like scratching an itch. They couldn't hurt these abyssal demonic cows at all. Suddenly, there was a whistle and the giant horned demon cows stopped. The black iron carriage opened, and a group of people in thick robes stepped out. Their feet touched the ground, and they wore thick robes. Their appearances were almost identical to those of humans, but the abyssal energy lingering around their bodies was enough to indicate their status. "My lord, not too far away, there's a large pile of demon skull remains. There is no lack of powerful demon beasts among them, so I didn't dare to approach." A tall abyssal demon bowed. Chapter 10:37. She wore a deep purple robe that covered her entire body. But her petite figure was enough to show that the one that this group of tall abyssal demons respectfully addressed as "Milord" was a woman. She looked up in front of her. A purple light flashed, and an invisible strength surged around her. All the falling stones that approached instantly froze and fell to the ground. Recently, holy energy has been spewing out frequently, and there are many signs of it becoming berserk. Although the timing isn't right, according to my observations, perhaps the beast tide is about to erupt again. A cold voice sounded out from beneath the robe. The surrounding abyssal demons paled, their pupils shrinking in panic. The abyss was endless, so deep that no end could be seen. Even the demons that had lived here for generations did not know where it led to. In this vast world, besides the abyssal demons, there were also endless demon beasts. To a certain degree, the abyssal demon beasts were the true masters of this world. Normally, things were still fine. Although there were demon beasts causing chaos in the deep abyss, the abyssal demons were able to suppress them and maintain order. But every once in a while, when the demonic energy erupting from the abyss became unstable, the demon beasts would gradually fall into a berserk state. At that time, hundreds of millions of demon beasts would gather together and wildly attack the region ruled by the abyssal demons. For countless years, the abyssal demons had recorded that countless demon cities had been destroyed because of this kind of demon beast rampage, with incomparably heavy casualties. This was the beast tide. The young girl beneath the robe came from a deeper abyss. Her identity was mysterious, and she was formidable. Although she hadn't been here for long, she had already obtained recognition through her own performance. No one dared to doubt her words. Thus, as time passed, the abyssal demons' complexions became increasingly ugly. Once the beast tide erupted, all abyssal demons would have to hide in the cities and use the thick walls to resist the impact. And outside the cities, everything would be torn to pieces by the rampaging demon beasts. Putting aside the deaths and injuries, just this alone would cause immeasurable losses. "Milord, if this is really the case, we must immediately return to the cities and gather our clansmen to hide in the cities," the tall abyssal demon said. The purple in the woman's eyes deepened. She slowly said, "There is still some time before the beast tide erupts. Let's first investigate the situation. I suspect that because of the holy energy rampage, a powerful demon beast has arrived from a deeper abyss. If we cannot kill it before the beast tide, once it erupts, it will likely control over 10,000 demon beasts." 10,000 beast level. The abyssal demons cried out in alarm, their eyes filled with terror. With the strength of the city they were in, if they really encountered the attack of 10,000 beasts, it was extremely likely that it would be breached. At that time, everyone would die. The stronger the demon beast was, the harder it would be to maintain its sanity after being invaded by the holy energy. It would instinctively slaughter and devour flesh to strengthen itself. The scene before them was similar. The tall demon turned around. His appearance was similar to that of a human, but his face was covered in dark scales. He said, "My lord is right. For the safety of the city, we must clearly investigate what happened here. If there really is a 10,000 beast magical beast here, we must kill it before the beast tide erupts." "Yes, leader." The surrounding abyssal demon energy roared. Cruel killing intent broke out from their bodies, and blood-red eyes appeared in their eyes. Beneath the black robes, the woman relaxed. Fortunately, her reason was sufficient. Otherwise, these striped crows might not have taken such a risk. In the depths of his eyes, a hint of purple flashed, and there was some nervousness in it. Just what was hidden here? Could this be what she was looking for? If so, then these striped crows were simply sending themselves to their deaths. But that didn't matter. They were just a group of lowly beings. If they died, then they died. What did it have to do with her? As long as she could confirm that what she was looking for was here, she would naturally have a way to obtain it. Thinking of this, the purple eyes beneath the black robes began to glow with both nervousness and anticipation. "Go!" With low roars, a dozen or so striped crow warriors rushed into the flying sand and stones with small steps. They were very experienced. The sounds they made were perfectly concealed in the flying sand and stones. Soon, the stench of blood unique to demon beasts entered their noses and mouths. The striped crows that rushed into this hell all revealed nervous expressions. There were far too many corpses, and they had been torn to shreds. Nearly everything was dyed pitch black as far as the eye could see. As they continued to enter, fear began to appear in their eyes. This was because amongst these shredded corpses, they saw many astonishingly strong demon beasts. The abyssal scaled wolf was a powerful and astonishingly fast predator. Its claws were especially sharp, and even a well-crafted demon beast leather pouch would find it difficult to resist its tearing. But now, half of the wolf's corpse was tossed to the ground. Looking at how much it had been buried in the sand, it had already been dead for at least 2 days. Even its sharp claws and several pieces of its forelimbs could be clearly seen. The spotted-scaled demonic snake was a type of grotesque snake whose body was covered in scales of different colors. As it lived longer, the color of the scales on its body would also increase. In front of them, this spotted scaled demon snake that had been torn into several pieces had scales of 7 or 8 different colors. It had lived for at least 300 years and was extremely powerful. It would take at least 10 striped crow warriors to kill it, and it would be difficult to avoid injuries. There was also the earth-shatter beast, the 8-legged blood spider, the black steel armor, and other terrifying demon beasts. In particular, the latter had incomparably tough skin and flesh that even sharp weapons would find it difficult to cut through. But now, it had been torn to shreds, with almost no part of it intact. Gulp! The dozen striped crows gulped. The blood-red light in their eyes faded, and they felt the courage in their chests vanish. Standing there, they raised their heads and looked forward. They could faintly see the silhouette of a low mountain peak. All of the demon beast corpses that had been killed were scattered around this mountain peak. Without accident, the demon beast they were looking for was likely to have escaped from the deep abyss and was hiding here. But now, their goal was right in front of them, and they didn't have the courage to continue forward. Those that came today were the strongest warriors of their tribe. Jowly was the patriarch's son, and he carried a saint artifact of their tribe with him, so he possessed formidable strength. But facing such a terrifying demon beast, the striped crows still didn't feel confident. If the striped crows knew that not too far away from where they were standing, there was a corpse of a dark thunder demon snake, they would surely turn around and leave. This was a dark thunder demon snake. It had the bloodline of a demon dragon flowing through its body. Not only did it have infinite potential to grow, but it was also incomparably formidable amongst demon beasts, strong enough to reach the 10,000 beast level. Dressed in purple robes, the woman walked silently behind the striped crows, the purple in her eyes becoming even deeper. At this time, as she looked at something flashing not too far away, her nose suddenly twitched. In the next moment, her eyes widened, revealing shock. Here, demon beast corpses were strewn all over the place, and a pungent stench assailed the nostrils. But she could still smell a very special scent. It wasn't strong, but it carried with it a special quality that instantly ignited the desire to occupy her heart. Fine scales rapidly appeared beneath her flesh and blood. They were translucent, as if they were polished from crystal. They covered the woman's entire face. There wasn't too much ferocity. At this moment, she gave off a strange sense of beauty, as if she were a beauty carved from crystal. A pair of purple eyes stared straight at the short mountain. She could even see that pitch-black cave. Her intuition told her that the source of that scent just now was in this cave, but unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't capture that scent again. But her instincts told her that no matter where that scent came from, she had to obtain it. Striped crows, you warriors are born with no concept of fear. You possess an invincible strength that can tear apart all obstacles in front of you. Now is the time for you to display your formidable strength. A clear and cold voice sounded out from beneath the robes. Every syllable was incomparably cold, but it also contained a powerful, bewitching ability. The fear and hesitation in Jiao Li's eyes rapidly faded away. He could feel that the woman behind him was incomparably important to him. In order to protect her, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice anything. He lifted a hand. Demonic energy surged and a black leather drum appeared. Its surface was heavily worn, and some of the patterns on the drum had already become blurry. But as it appeared, the abyssal demon energy in this space seemed to be attracted to it and began to gather from all directions. It gathered into a ball that tumbled endlessly. Woo-woo. A figure appeared in the abyssal demon energy. It was a strangely shaped demon beast. Its eyes were blood red, as if they were soaked in blood. It glared at the cave and roared out loud. Ow! Jiaoli roared out loud. He ruthlessly struck the leather drum in his hands. There was no sound, but the blood-eyed demon beast phantom condensed in the abyssal demon energy seemed to be strongly driven. It rushed out, straight towards the cave. Bang! There was a dull thud, like a mountain crashing down from the highest heavens, crashing into the earth. The deep sound penetrated into the mind. The blood-eyed demon beast phantom that rushed to the cave entrance was like a bubble, directly popping and dissipating. The abyssal demon energy that condensed its body collapsed and dissipated with it. With a loud whoosh, it rushed out in all directions, forming a ring-shaped impact that instantly swept away all the sand and stones in the world. For a short period of time, a blank space appeared. The leather drum in Jiao Li's hand cracked open from the middle. Everyone seemed to hear a howl of despair. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His spirit instantly withered, and the determination and courage in his eyes were like a punctured ball. In the blink of an eye, all that was left over was fear. All of the striped crow warriors stared with wide eyes at the figure that walked out of the cave entrance. His figure couldn't be considered tall. Compared to them, he couldn't be considered strong. But now, the aura he emitted caused them to instinctively feel endless fear. It was like they were facing a predator at the top of the food chain. With just a glance, he could kill them. Chapter 1038. Beneath the robes, the purple eyes fiercely shrank. The beautiful face covered in scales revealed a look of shock. She didn't think that she would encounter a member of the royal family in such a remote place. Moreover, from his aura, she could tell that he was extremely strong. The royal family had a high status and lived in the center of the abyss. They wouldn't easily appear, so why was this person in front of her here? Could it be that he had also sensed something? Also, what did that aura from before have to do with him? Countless thoughts raced through her mind. Her beautiful purple eyes became increasingly solemn. No matter what, it wasn't good news to encounter a powerful member of the royal family in the territory of the striped crow race. Royal clan. A striped crow warrior's legs went weak, and he knelt on the ground. His tall and sturdy body trembled. The cruel laws of the Abyss created a strict hierarchy. The dignity of a noble member of the Abyss royal family could not be violated. The strength of the striped crow race could only be considered below average amongst the races of the Abyss. And the strongest member of their race was only at the level of a demon general. They simply couldn't resist the anger of a royal family member. Even if they were all killed, there wouldn't be any trouble. In fact, their race would even have to kneel and beg for forgiveness. Jiao Li's face was filled with despair. But at this time, a light flashed in his eyes, as if he was grasping at the last straw of hope. He turned and knelt down. "My lady, please save us. We absolutely didn't mean to offend the noble royal family member." She came from a deeper layer of the Abyss and had purple eyes. These are the hallmarks of a high-level abyssal race. The reason the striped crow race had committed such a grave mistake was because they had followed her orders. Now that they had caused trouble, they naturally had to ask her for help. This was their last chance. Beneath the robes, there was a moment of silence. Then, two white and delicate palms crossed in front of each other. This was the benefit of a high-level demon race. A clear and cold voice sounded out. "Royal Spirit Demon Race's Mianya greets the royal family member. Today's matter is a misunderstanding. We are willing to pay compensation in exchange for your forgiveness. Please forgive our offense." Royal Spirit Demon Race. Jiao Li's eyes suddenly lit up. Sure enough, he saw that the black robe was pulled down, revealing a fair and flawless beautiful face. It was cold and expressionless, and two delicate horns were faintly discernible between the black hair on top of her head. There's hope. Although the Royal Spirit Demon race wasn't the Abyssal King race, it was still one of the more powerful races in the Abyssal realm. There weren't many of them, but they possessed a powerful royal spirit inheritance. Even when facing the Abyssal King race, they were qualified to speak on equal terms. Qin Yu frowned for a moment before composing himself. "Leave this place immediately." "Ah, yes, 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 we will leave immediately. Thank you for your magnanimity." "Thank you." Jiao Li trembled with excitement. The group of striped crow warriors shivered in fear as they ran away. Each of them felt that their lives had been saved. A trace of shock was revealed in Mianya's eyes. Evidently, she did not expect that the matter would be resolved so easily. Her eyes flickered as she paused at the entrance of the cave. Soon after, she bowed once again. "Thank you, sir. We will take our leave." After boarding the black iron carriage pulled by the giant horn magic cow, the speckled crow turned around without hesitation and ran far away. Only then did the people in the carriage let out a sigh of relief. The Abyssal royal family was extremely strong and viewed ordinary demon races as slaves. It was normal for them to kill them at every turn. For them to be able to escape this calamity today could only be considered their good luck. Jiao Li bowed. "Thank you, Lady Mianya, for helping us. Otherwise, we would have died today." He lowered his head, his face hidden in the darkness so that no one could see him clearly. Mianya had already pulled up her black robes, covering herself once more. She lightly said, "There is no need to be polite. I had no intention of putting you all in danger. This is what I should do." She stood up and said, "I have already stayed here for a long time. I will leave today." Soon, with a whistle, the giant horn magic cow came to a stop. Mianya stepped down from the black iron carriage. She took several light steps forwards and soon vanished into the sandstorm. Jiao Li's complexion was cloudy and uncertain. Finally, he clenched his teeth and said, "Let's go." "Young master, there's a problem with this woman. She deliberately bewitched us, but are we just going to let her leave like this?" A striped crow warrior asked in a low voice. Jiao Li's complexion became even uglier. "What else can we do? The strength of the royal spirit demon race is not something we can provoke. There is no need to say anything else. Return to the city immediately." The giant horn magic cow pulled the black iron carriage once more, rumbling away into the distance. Not long after the striped crows left, there was a fluctuation in space. Mianya, who had left in another direction, slowly appeared. As she looked in the direction that the striped crows left in, A cold light flashed in the depths of her eyes. These lowly and inferior races had actually dared to show her any disrespect. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want to stir up any more trouble, she would have killed them all just now. Turning around, Mianya looked in the direction that the black iron carriage had come from. A purple light surged in her eyes as she revealed a thoughtful look. After a short period of hesitation, she turned back. Several steps later, her body faded away like a shadow. Facing the striped crows that had come looking for him, the only thing Chinyu had done was to defeat the phantom of the blood-eyed demon beast, causing them to fall into a state of extreme fear. Royal race. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. He looked at Liao Shi, who had a calm expression, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. The problem lies in your appearance. Liao Shi rolled her eyes at Chinyu. The abyssal races are different from the world of the living. The more powerful their bloodline, the more similar their external characteristics are to humans, and vice versa. But only the abyssal royal race has a powerful king that has obtained the recognition of the abyss. Their bloodline is raised to the limit, and their appearance is completely the same as that of humans. So, when they see you, they treat you as a member of the royal race. Listening to her speak, some information appeared in Chinyu's mind. He knew that what she said was correct, and also understood the reason for the striped crow's fear. As long as a member of the royal race had a valid reason, their strength was enough to destroy a tribe of low-level abyssal races, and they wouldn't provoke any trouble. You seem to understand the abyss. After looking at it for a long time, of course I know some things. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. If you want me to help you crack the myriad soul Tao, this little bit of time is far from enough. How long do you need? The longer the better. Chinyu rubbed his temples, giving up on this meaningless topic. Will there be trouble if I let these demons leave? The striped crows are only a low-level abyssal race, and their strength is limited. Once they recognize you as a member of the royal race, they won't provoke you again. Liao Shi paused for a moment, his lips curling up in a smile. But that girl is a bit interesting. I fear she won't give up so easily. Chinyu frowned. What do you mean? Liao Shi blinked. This question, it would be better if you asked her yourself. Chinyu's complexion changed. At this time, the beating heart of the abyss in his chest sent out a warning. His thoughts racing, Chinyu stood up and walked outside the cave. He expressionlessly said, Miss Mianya, may I ask why you have returned? His icy cold voice was unable to be covered up by the howling wind and sand. It spread far and wide. After several breaths of silence, there was a fluctuation in space. Mianya, dressed in a deep purple robe, appeared from within. You are truly worthy of being a member of the royal race. You have such keen senses. Mianya admires you. Chinyu didn't respond to this, but his eyes became even colder. Mianya took a deep breath. She lifted her palm, and demonic energy surged from her heart. Then, something appeared. It was clearly a crystallized, jet-black heart. This is the most precious treasure in my hands. It is the heart left behind by an abyssal king after he perished. Although the abyssal source contained within this heart has already dispersed, there is still a bit of the aura of an abyssal king left behind. With this, one can greatly increase their closeness to the holy energy of the abyssal and increase their cultivation speed. Speaking to here, Mianya paused for a moment. A purple light surged in the depths of her eyes. I am willing to use this object to make a transaction with you. Chinyu's eyes narrowed. Leave here, sir, Mianya shouted out loud. The effects of this crystallized heart will definitely satisfy you. Let me finish speaking. All I ask is that there is something on your side. It is not impossible to trade for it. Chinyu took a step forwards. Wherever his foot landed, the ground instantly shattered. Countless cracks spread out like a spider web. I will only say the same thing once. Leave or die. Mianya's pupils violently shrank. At this moment, she could feel a blazing, killing intent coming from Chinyu. She didn't doubt Chinyu's determination. If she refused, he would immediately attack. Damn it, Mian Yan's complexion was ugly. But as she met Chinyu's eyes, Her heart became increasingly cold. She took a deep breath and cupped her hands in front of her. I have been presumptuous. Since you are unwilling, then Mionya bids her farewells. She turned and left, her figure hidden in the sandstorm. The moment she vanished, a voice echoed out from afar. Even if the beast tide erupts, no matter why you are here, it is best for you to leave first. Consider this message as an apology from Mionya. Qingyu frowned. Beast tide? He turned around and looked at Teacher Liao, who was deep within the cave. She is right. Abyssal demonic energy is rioting, and there are many chaotic and unstable fluctuations. This is indeed a sign of a beast tide. It should erupt within 5 days. Teacher Liao smiled. Then his tone suddenly changed. This little girl should have sensed my aura. With your intelligence, you should be able to figure out why you haven't killed her yet. Could it be that you have compassion for her because she is so beautiful? Qin Yu's lips twitched. I didn't kill her because I wasn't confident. Teacher Liao clapped her hands. You are quite self-aware. This little girl isn't easy to kill. You were right not to kill her. She blinked. However, she might not have told you about the beast tide out of kindness. I believe that you will meet again soon. Qin Yu had a calm expression. If she continues to pester me, although I am not confident, I can only try to kill her. This matter involved cracking the myriad soul Tao. No matter who it was, they cannot affect this. Moreover, he wasn't afraid of killing anyone. Moreover, this was only an abyssal life form. As for the trouble that might arise, if he couldn't avoid it, he could only calmly face it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.